Okay. Get up my agenda. All right. Sorry, I just have to find my agenda. Okay. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by sending such notice to the Asbury Park Press, the Middletown Patch, and the Middletown Township Public School District website, and the posting of such notice at the August T. Minor administrative offices and each elementary, middle, and secondary school website in the district. Roll call.
Mrs. Caminetti,
Here.
Mr. DeFranco,
Here.
Mr. Donlin,
Here.
Mr. Jima,
Here.
Mr. Little,
Here.
Mrs. Minuis, Mrs. Wright,
Here.
Mrs. Rogers,
Here.
Mrs. Stella. Mrs. Stella?
Okay, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I'll just call Mrs. Minuis, just making sure. Okay. Okay.
Okay, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
it stands,
one
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
all.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to ask for the presentation of the final 2020 to 2021 school year budget.
Mrs. Rogers, we're actually going to do the committee reports first.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Works for me.
We can start with technology.
Good evening, everybody. Just a couple items on tonight's committee agenda for technology. First item on the agenda is I'd like to provide the board an update on our virtual home instruction tech support and also our on-site help desk. So as of this morning, we have distributed a total of 656 devices, 101 mobile hotspots as well to our students and staff. We are averaging approximately about 25 units distributed and or replaced per week now, which is compared to about 25 per day during the first couple of weeks of home instruction. We continue to support all of our students and staff virtually. We do that through email, phone, remote concessions, and through online connections. Since we began virtual home instruction, we've added some new tools to our arsenal. One of the new tools we have now allows us to remote connect to any device or any district issued device for troubleshooting purposes, as opposed to just a Windows device, which we were able to do in the past. So now we can actually remote into a student's or staff member's Chromebook if they give us permission to troubleshoot. This one tool has reduced the number of visits we've had tremendously, and I think that's also why that number has dropped from 25 units a day to 25 per week now. Continue to maintain our technology support site. On our website, we include relevant information. We include documentation, support contacts, support numbers, support hours, and then tips and like FAQs for parents and students that they can walk through things before they reach out to us. We've also, as a tech department, we see a lot of common questions coming in from parents and or students. So we've compiled these questions and we have templates generated now. So this way, when a question comes in, one of our tech staff can immediately respond to it It has reduced the length of time it's taken for a response. Now it's literally minutes when someone can respond to it, because now everybody in the team has the same information, and they can hand those off to the parents. This too has reduced the number of visits that we've seen for parents and students or staff to actually have to come into our on-site support help desk for assistance. That being said, we still maintain the on-site support because everything can't be prepared virtually. So the support hours continue to be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 8 to 12. Outside those hours, we accept appointments, appointment only. The on-site support is obviously located outside the high school North Main entrance, and is limited to a drop-off pickup. We no longer do repairs on site because we don't want anybody waiting around while we repair. And while we do the drop-off pickup, we obviously are following all the social distancing protocols that are in place now. Second item for tonight's agenda is a Genesis 5 server. So in order to move as quickly and efficiently possible and reach deadlines that we have to move our finance and personnel to the Genesis platform, we've been hosting it on their secure cloud servers for the last few weeks. Last week, our server actually was delivered. We racked it, and it's running right now, Windows 29. It's in place, and we're just waiting on support from Genesis to remote session to install the Oracle side of it. Once they do that, we'll be able to move all of our data back to our hosted core and then continue the version. The server, I don't know if you guys care, the server is it's a pretty robust server, so it has plenty of room for growth. It has 720 gigs of usable storage, 32 gigs of RAM. It's got a 10 gig network connection, which is the highest you can get right now, which is pretty good. So we should be well into the future with this device. The last thing I have is MTPS Summer Student Technology Internship. So this Monday, we posted the internship application online like we normally do. We shared that out through Now Johnson High School's Twitter, and we shared it out through the computer science teachers through their classrooms, encouraging students to participate. The application will be open through the end of the week, and we'll begin handling virtual interviews as of next week. Obviously, due to current circumstances, the entire internship, as well as what the responsibilities or what the students can be allowed to do, is still up in the air. We're just going to wait on direction from the state, the county, the township, as well as district administration on what we can and cannot do. But we're hopeful that we will be able to facilitate some type of internship this summer, but that is yet to be determined. But we're still going to move forward with the applicants at this point. That's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you. Can someone, Chris Rotolo, can you help Lester get into the meeting?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Let's move on to student services, please.
Hi, everyone. I'll start with the committee report. We had a student services committee meeting on April 16th. And I would say the focus of our meeting was definitely on the virtual instruction. We talked about the rollout of the para support, which had just been starting around that time. There were meetings with the paraprofessionals, staggered meetings to give them support after they had done quite an extensive amount of PD. And currently, the paraprofessionals are assisting individually and in groups and classrooms and moving on with PD. So that's what's taking place with them right now. We discussed the related services, which are all taking place virtually, all of our PT, OT, our supplemental instruction, our speech, counseling, all taking place virtually. We went over how the special education instruction is working virtually with the co-teachers joining the general education classrooms. And we talked about the child study team and how they are doing with all of the IEP meetings. Their staff is attending, the therapists, the case managers, and the parents. We also spoke about ESY planning. The ESY board approved dates are July 1st through August 6th, Monday through Thursdays from 8:30 to 12:30, with the preschool and elementary being held at Harmony and middle high school at Thorn. Because we are in these unprecedented times, we also talked about how we are planning for school-based ESY at this time, but we also are planning for a backup virtual ESY in case we need to move in that direction. So that was our committee meeting on April 16th. On your voting agenda, though the district is doing remote distance learning, we do have some students who are doing individual or supplemental home instruction for a number of reasons. And we do have one settlement agreement that will be voted on. That is a continuation. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. Moving on to facilities finance, please.
We will update the board on the committee meeting that we had on April 15th. Part of that committee meeting was a presentation from Ed O'Malley, our health insurance broker from Gallagher Benefit Services. Ed is actually here this evening to talk to the board and give the board directly a summary of this year's marketing results and the renewal that is on the agenda for tonight's meeting for insurance coverage for next year. So I will turn the floor over to Ed.
Good evening, everyone. As Amy mentioned, thank you, Amy, for the introduction. What I'd like to present to you this evening is the results of several months of my team and I efforts in the marketplace to secure the best opportunity for the renewal beginning 7/1 of this year. If I can, I'm going to share my screen with you. Just give me a moment. Chris, can you tell me why that's not moving?
Can I tell you why your screen is not moving?
Yeah, I'm trying to share the screen. Can you see all of my screens or just
Yes.
the one?
Yes, we can see your entire screen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Not a problem.
What I'd like to do is to give you just a high-level update that we've provided to the administration as well as to the Finance Committee. And over the last several months, we've looked at a variety of different funding options for the district, including fully insured and looking at self-funded options, as well as joint purchasing arrangements. We've also looked at and investigated a number of alternative approaches, such as the difference card, task, and discovery benefits, who offer a variety of different tools to help reduce the overall cost of your programs in health and prescription. We also wanted to review with you our financial summary and our recommendations. So if I can, if you take a look at this particular summary, your current program is running approximately $24,425,000. The renewal is presented by Horizon effective July 1st, where they have two current coverages. They have the health insurance and they have the dental. Benecard is your prescription carrier currently that you moved to last year. Horizon initial renewal came in at 10%. Benecard's came in at 16.73%, and the dental program came in at a 20% increase. And when we blend all those together, the overall impact, the fiscal impact to the district would have been an increase of 11.47%, almost 11.5%, which in these budget times is really unsustainable and not budgetable. We looked at a wide variety of the carriers on all three of these lines of coverage. Probably if we added them all up, there would be in excess of 20 different carriers. There's about 5 on the medical side. We also looked, as I mentioned, on the health insurance fund, an alternative purchasing arrangement. But the best numbers that we received after significant negotiations was from Aetna and also from Horizon. On the Aetna program, they offered a program that just simply spread the rates across all three lines, with them taking over the medical, the prescription, and the dental. And that would have totaled approximately $25.8 million. and an overall increase of 5.5%. The second option that we wanted to talk to you about was the Horizon option, whereby instead of remaining with Benecard, we gave them all three lines of coverage: the medical, the prescription, and the dental. That totaled $25,961,000. That is the recommendation from my team and I. Our actuaries and myself, our entire team looked at this, and even though the number is slightly higher than what you would be able to get with Aetna, in this very, very difficult time, we feel that the disruption that would occur should you decide to make a move to a different carrier such as Aetna would be really an additional burden on the entire staff and the administration, since we don't have the staff in-house that we can communicate effectively with, answer questions, and review options. So our recommendation is option 2, to remain with Horizon for the medical and the dental and add the prescription line, which is actually lower than your current rates on the RX from Benecard. This will set the stage for us to begin looking and already preparing for next year's renewal as soon as we come out of this pandemic. We believe that we're going to be able to get better information utilizing this option 2, significantly better information in terms of claims and history, in particular on the prescription side, where we get very, very limited claims data. And that handcuffed us somewhat in getting competitive quotations from some of the pharmacy benefit managers out there, Caremark, CVS, Express Scripts, as well as Aetna and some of the other major pharmacy benefit managers. So in all, to summarize, we typically do not recommend to a Board of Education or any of our public accounts to move their benefits for less than a 2% differential between the quotes. And here we're at less than 1%, almost 75.75%. And that is our recommendation. And again, we anticipate working very diligently to provide the district with additional options going forward. We're already working with the administration, should you approve this recommendation this evening, to put together everything that's necessary to bring back the Horizon RX program into the fold. That would be the least disruptive to your staff. And we did have some significant challenges with Benecard in not covering certain prescriptions that were covered when you were with Horizon previously. And that basically is the end of my report for this evening. I'm available to answer any questions that the board may have.
Hey, Ed, it's Nick DeFranco. I hope you're staying safe and well. Question for you about the follow-on renewals and what people may be hearing, given the fact that the COVID-19 crisis, is a healthcare issue and will likely drive costs up. It's already burdening our healthcare system. So, are the actuaries looking ahead to the following year and thinking about what the impact on premiums might be and what we can expect?
That's an excellent question, Nick. And they are, our actuaries have already, they're on their third version of the models that they are looking at. And all the data that we're seeing right now, Nick, shows that there will be a decline in claims for the balance of this year. And the reason for that is that, as you're aware, all procedures that can be postponed have been postponed. No one is seeing a physician face-to-face today, unless it's in the emergency room. And we're seeing significant drops. Our firm insures several hundred healthcare or health plans or hospital systems across the nation. And I was talking with a CFO yesterday who indicated that their revenue is down 40% over what it was last year. And that's specifically because they're not seeing patients, they're not doing elective procedures, and we anticipate that to go forward through the balance of this year. They are taking that into account, and we're seeing overall either a flat or a diminution in claims over the next 12 months.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick. Are there any other questions that I might answer?
Thank you, Ed.
Ed,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
And
Thanks, Ed.
I just want to say that you and your team have been very good to work with so far. And, we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Okay.
Have a good evening, everyone.
You too, Ed.
Thanks, Ed. Okay. Moving on.
I think we have to get off. Okay, here we go. But next we have the committee report from the Facilities and Finance meeting. I'm not sure, Mr. Little, if you want to, who you want to report on that?
There you go. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, John.
Can you hear me clear? Great. Most of the finance meeting was talking about the insurance that Mr. Gallagher just presented to everybody. But there's some additional things. Mr. Cahill, Director of Facilities, gave us an update of what's going on. One of the bigger items was the custodial team has been taking training into new ways to clean the buildings. They're obviously going through all the buildings and scrubbing them down. One of the items was getting the elementary schools more to the same level that middle and high schools have been in terms of cleanliness. They're taking the trainings. They expect all the buildings to be scrubbed down before next school year. In addition, some of the custodial staff and grounds crew have been helping to deliver food. The district vehicles being used, the employee are only one per vehicle. They're not sharing vehicles. They're practicing social distancing. They're spending minimal time in the building other than the cleaning I just referred to. Some of the other items out there is that the elementary school air condition units are being repaired. There's filters have to be replaced. Our teams have decided to do it themselves because one of the bids we received was a pretty high bid. That might not be done before the school year starts, but shortly thereafter. One of the next item we talked about besides insurance was, and I don't know how much detail I can go into it, would be the bill from the state. I think it's about external vendors, A3904. Not sure how much detail I can go into that, but that's where the state is requiring school districts to pay external vendors, including, for example, our transportation contracts. There's some clarity that's required in terms of what that means. The district is working on that. We also spoke about some of the additional saves that we have in the district, some of the additional costs we may have. So one of the things we discussed was just because the school district is closed, there might be some additional saves, but in addition, there might be some additional costs. So it's unclear where we're going to wind up. I think there's a view in the public that we're going to be saving a lot of money. That's not 100% clear. There could be other costs that come up during the year as we go through. In addition, we heard about the insurance was a little bit higher than what we originally anticipated. We're going to have to make up that difference. And at the end of the day, I think that's all I had, Amy. One other thing we mentioned was the Federal Education Stabilization Fund that the district looks like we're going to be receiving about $300,000. And I guess that's that's due to the current pandemic. I don't know if there's any restrictions on using that money. I think we can use it for payments to employers, to employees, and I guess we could use that for third-party contractors. Like I said, the rest of the notes we have here about the insurance that Mr. Gallagher.
The only thing I'll add is on the Federal Education Stabilization Fund monies, we have an estimate that was calculated by the New Jersey School Boards Association. We don't have any official allocation. Those funds are being allocated along the lines of our Title I funding allocations. And while we can use that to pay employees and contractors, there is also some tie back to the purpose of Title I funds, and that the funds should be used to support similar type operations. So again, we don't have the full information on that. We have, what's been released through the papers and so forth, and through the Department of Ed, but we don't have an actual allocation at this point, and we do not know when those monies would be received.
Excuse me, may I make a recommendation? Amy, when you come across very clear. I don't know if it's with your computer, your technology. When John was trying to give the report, I know what's in the report because I was at that meeting, but I couldn't understand anything that John was saying. And I don't know if it's our technology, how we're connecting or whatever it is. Just if everybody else is listening out in the public, I don't think they could hear anything.
Okay.
No, sorry, that was me. I was having some issues. I apologize.
So just to recap, we did go over the health insurance update, and Mr. O'Malley just spoke. John talked some about the efforts in facilities and the cleaning efforts and the other filters and maintenance type projects that we're currently working on to continue to prep the buildings for an eventual return by students. The budget, the transportation contracts, we talked about the legislation which allows districts to make payments to contractors. However, we're working on determining amounts, particularly for our transportation contracts. The bill also applied to other vendors, but the largest focus for school districts are on these transportation contracts. And we're continuing to work through that issue to determine the appropriate course of action. We have been looking at savings and costs that are being generated by our current virtual learning situation, not just for the current budget year, but for the next budget year, and continuing to try to get a handle on some of those things. But there are a lot more question marks at this point than answers. So we're trying to be as conservative as possible and stay fluid so we can address any unexpected costs that may come our way as a result of the current situation. And that was basically it. The report was posted on the portal for the board to review. So that is in your BOE portal.
Amy, I have a question.
Yes.
Do you know, so far, are we going to be entitled to any of the funding that they're coming out with for COVID-19?
Well, part of the funding would be that what we just spoke about, the Federal Education Stabilization Funds, which again, the school boards has estimated that our allocation could be, approximately $310,000. We don't have any official notification of that, nor do we have a timeline for when those funds would be received. As far as other funds that may be available to us, we are looking into, for example, if we could possibly have any expenses that would be covered by FEMA. So looking into that, potentially some of our cleaning expenses and things of that nature. We are exploring where we can, but probably the most significant funding we would receive would be those federal education stabilization funds, the $310,000.
And with the governor extending their fiscal year till October 1st, and then there's been some talk about possibly reviewing the formula for state aid. Do you have any idea if that would, well, we really don't know what he's going to address, but
We don't,
are we prepared to take a cut?
we don't have any guidance on that at this point. We have not, there's two portions to that. There's, the current year's state aid, which we are entitled to 2 more payments in May that total about $1.6 million. In addition to that, there is the topic of next year's state aid, which, again, we've been given our allocation. We have constructed our budget, but as happened a few years ago, it's not out of the realm of possibility that there would be an adjustment in July. But again, we have not been given any notification or guidance that would reflect that that is going to happen. But, like what your point is, which, it is a point, that doesn't mean that something won't happen. But we don't have anything definite on that at this point.
And it's a good possibility that we won't know until October, if he's extending it to October 1st.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, we found out, again, back in, I'm losing track of time, I think it was 2018 or 2017 it was, that after we started our fiscal year in July, we then received notification that we were being cut $1.1 million. So, right, to your point now, if everything's been extended out to October 1st, it would be, it would give them longer to make an adjustment, to the school.
All right, just want to make sure we're.
Yeah, as soon as we hear anything, obviously we will keep the board informed, but as of right now, everything is in discussion stage, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Under facilities and finance, besides our committee report, we also have the, we talked about the medical, and that's on the agenda. And we have also, on the committee report to discuss our final budget, which will hold till the end of the other committee reports, because we will just transition right into the hearing on the final budget. So we can move on to curriculum.
Okay, thanks, Amy. On to curriculum.
Okay, we met April 1st, and it was a really long but informative meeting, and I'm actually going to pass it on to Mrs. Pekas, because several of the items that we discussed are pretty fluid and a lot has changed since then. So here we go. I'll pass it on to Mrs. Pekas.
Mrs. Stella, and to your point, we have been constantly updating the community. Dr. George has been very active in issuing formal letters and podcasts and e-alerts. We've used many different social platforms to inform all of our stakeholders, our parents, our students, our staff members of the changes as we've made them in real time. So at our meeting, we discussed the revisions that were made right before and then right after spring break with regard to the middle school and high school virtual instruction schedule plan. The crux of that, the real motivation there was to increase flexibility for students in completing their daily and weekly assignments. So those slight adjustments to the schedules, we feel accomplished that, especially after we met last week with our student representatives from both High School South and High School North. They were in almost 100% agreement. I can't think of anyone who didn't offer a lot of compliments about the schedule, and especially to their teachers and the support staff who are assisting them in this virtual environment. We also, right after spring break, revised the elementary schedule, virtual and home instruction schedule, to include the launch of a new learning platform, Imagine Learning, which has been very successful to date. The overwhelming majority of our students are using the opportunity to participate in the online platform. This platform adapts in real time to their learning needs for both English language arts and mathematics, and it offers both remediation and enrichment opportunity for skill and concept development. So we are very glad to see that students and especially their parents, who are probably urging them in the elementary level, that they are taking advantage of this personalized learning opportunity and platform. Mr. Siwiak gave a really good update on how we're addressing our technological needs. We discussed that a great deal for a great length of time at our meeting. So I'm going to skip over that because Mr. Siwiak just did a great job. We also discussed all of the fact that all components of our academic, social, emotional, special education, inter-tiered intervention, extracurricular, and free and reduced lunch programs are being maintained, albeit in different ways during virtual home instruction to the best of our district's ability. Students and parents are reminded and encouraged to communicate their needs as they may change and their interests with their teachers, counselors, assistant principals, and principals if they need further assistance during this time. Our district has been highlighted by various different national and local state agencies as a model district across the nation and the state in transitioning to the virtual home instruction world. Our staff continues to exceed our expectations in providing instruction with new standards and content on multiple platforms such as Zoom, as well as offering students office hours and individualized support. We discussed that at the meeting, and it continues to impress us on a daily basis, the feedback that we receive, our staff's efforts. The curriculum, special education, student activities, and athletic departments have been actively working with building administrators and human resources to finalize staffing needs based on current and projected enrollments at the elementary and middle school, high school level regarding student requests. New curricula continues to be developed by our curriculum committees in the virtual environment. Interviews will begin next week to identify the candidate who will be recommended to serve as the high school American Sign Language instructor. That's going to be one of our new courses next year at the high school level. It's a very exciting launch of this new program for our students. We have an overwhelming interest at both High School North and High School South for first year launch of that program. And Mrs. Caruso is leading the interview committee in that process. Elementary principals, curriculum and special education administrators have finalized the revised schedule that would be implemented in September of 2020 for the elementary schools. The revisions to the daily schedule and instructional guidelines will ensure that we are prepared to fully implement the new state mandates and curriculum standards such as technology, as well as our district initiatives during the 2021 school year, such as social emotional learning. The revisions to the weekly elementary subject area schedule will include the fact that we will be moving to a 6-day rotation of our special subjects for health and PE, art, music, Spanish, and technology. In accordance with state legislation, we will be increasing the number of minutes our students receive health and physical education instruction by a certified health and PE teacher. That is a law that is now something that we must comply with. Along the same lines, we will also be increasing minutes during the day to implement social emotional learning opportunities, most specifically in the form of responsive classroom. And we will ensure that there is time for personalized learning and individualized instruction, which we know will be more important than ever. Our students, if and when, ultimately when we return to the brick and mortar classrooms of our schools, there will undoubtedly be some opportunity and need to address gaps that may exist because during virtual home instruction, there may be pieces of curriculum or parts of curriculum that may not have been able to be addressed to their fullest, to the fullest extent possible. So we want to make sure that there is time within the schedule next year to address whatever gaps students will face and we will need to close. We will look forward to launching that new schedule in 2020, September. Lastly, principals and central office administrators have been meeting with high school staff and students regarding possible revisions to the, in the event that virtual home instruction continues, which we know it will at least until May 15th. At our last meeting, it was not determined that it would go that long. Mr. Kirkpatrick and Dr. Cartier are hosting additional meetings with staff this week, and the district will be making an announcement within the next few days regarding any revisions that may be necessary to the fourth marking period quarterly administration and the calculation and procedures for determining fourth marking period grades. We feel this is really important to ensure that our students are not adversely affected by any consequences or obstacles that they are facing during virtual home instruction. And we will be meeting to discuss possible grading procedure revisions for middle school students as well. I know on the agenda this evening, Mrs. Caruso has added, and she will be discussing already the slight revision that we had to make to our grading regulation with regard to how we handled the administration of third marking period quarterlies. But we're now looking forward ahead and know that we may have to make some changes over the next couple of weeks for the fourth marking period as well. So I think that kind of summarizes, to the best of my ability, that long meeting, Mrs. Stella, but we did have a great conversation that night.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
I have a question. How are we tracking the students that are having difficulties at home and they're not reaching out?
So I'll also defer to Mrs. Walker or Mr. Ranella, because I know they speak daily with our school nurses and our guidance counselors and administrators. But that's a very good question, Mrs. Minuiz. We've been very active in monitoring student accessibility and interaction with their teachers in the virtual environment, whether it be on a platform like this, like Zoom or Google Meet or Flipgrid. The teachers, especially at the middle school and high school level, include a daily check-in on some sort of real-time platform like this. If they see that a student is not making an attempt to access the instruction or join these conversations or the instruction that's happening or submitting assignments, they are notifying the student's guidance counselor, SBSS, the principal or assistant principal if it's a high school or middle school, and the administrators and guidance counselors are reaching out to those families and those students in real time to find out what is happening, why there's a lack of engagement in the virtual environment, and what may be necessary to occur or assistance that may be needed to get them more involved.
I just want to add to that too. We had a meeting with all the, with some of the staff from the high schools recently. I mean, the students rather from the high schools recently, and they were saying how the teachers not only are teaching them their lessons in, curriculum, but they are genuinely reaching out with social emotional support, asking them how they are, just touching base with them, asking if they need any supports other than academic. The same is going for the counselors, and I'll talk about that a little later, and the administrators and the nurses. If there's a student that we haven't been able to reach that we're concerned with because they're not handing in assignments, we're actually doing visits where either Mr. McGuire or in some instances, we've had the police officers go over there nicely, not in terms of anything that a police officer you would think of, but just to try to talk to the student and tell them how important it was. And so they really are making a great effort to make sure that every student is accessing the education.
But how are they school-wise monitoring that though? Because we might be doing a great job and everybody's got great ideas, but there's bound to be a bunch of students that we're missing.
Kim, I can speak to that a little bit because it's coming through and this is one of the agenda items that we're speaking about on the curriculum report tonight, is the expansion of our summer programming. And that summer programming traditionally is geared towards our students in tiered intervention in literacy and mathematics, K-8. This year, we are actually expanding our efforts to include that exact pool of students that exist, those that are struggling in the virtual home instruction world, as well as those students that might have IEPs and do not qualify for ESY. We have already sent out to all staff members K-8 an identification form where they are recommending students who are suffering some of that lag at this point, so we can be proactive in inviting them to participate in our summer program, which will change structure with the goal of trying to remediate some of these deficits that we know that are going to exist when we go back to those brick and mortar classrooms, as Mrs. Pekas had mentioned.
And the other thing that
I'd like to just add that one of the unintended consequences of this unfortunate situation has been continuous ongoing communication with us as a central office administrative team with all stakeholders. So as Mrs. Walker pointed out, we have met with students. We've met with teachers talking about virtual learning. Our building level administration we're meeting with daily as a central office administrative team. And we've been able to see firsthand the coordination between those building level administration, the teaching staff, the communication between the teaching staff and the counseling services to make sure that we're literally not leaving any child behind. And so to be able to talk on a regular basis with teachers, with students, with building level administrators about what instruction is looking like in this virtual environment, what our number one concerns are about the kind of questions that have been brought up by the board members here tonight has really provided us as a central office team a really hands-on opportunity to make sure that all of our staff members are really working hard. And I want to say, I know it was mentioned earlier, our technicians, but I can't thank enough the work and the leadership of our nurses, of our technicians, of our teachers, of our counselors, our building level administrators, central office administrators, everybody working collaboratively together to make sure we're meeting the needs of our students during this most difficult time.
I don't doubt anything you're saying, Dr. George, but my concern is the students that you are talking to, they are getting it, but there are many students out there that no one is talking to. And
Joan,
that's
can
what my
I
concern is.
can I just interrupt, not interrupt, but there have been protocols from the very beginning put into place where each building has a Google Doc where they put in, the teachers put in a student every day that hasn't logged on, hasn't handed in assignment. The next morning they'll do this. Whether they were able to contact, if they were, what was the issue with the student. If they weren't, then that goes down to the guidance counselors, the administrators, and the nurses who then make the contact. So there is a protocol in place that the buildings are following.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up so that people listening know that, I know I keep getting the answer. Tell the people to call the school and call the administrators, and you could do that till you're blue in the face. But there are some working families that just don't have the time. They're working, they're working either maybe even in the healthcare profession. They're trusting their kids to do their homework or whatever. I'm just concerned about how we follow up for those people. And if you're saying you're doing that, that's fine. I hope that we are.
We appreciate that. And we know we talk a lot. Kim, just today in our conversations, Marielle Walker, Kim Pickus, myself, with building level administrators about the equity in all of this. So we have those students, some of which are thriving better in this environment than they did in the more traditional environments. Others thrived in the traditional environment and are thriving in this environment. Then there are those students who thrived in the traditional environment who are not thriving in this environment. So we talk a lot about equity and what we're doing to make sure that we're reaching every student. So no, I really appreciate your questioning on this because it gives us opportunity to talk about the kind of things we're doing. So thank you.
Right, and Dr. George too, it sounds very similar to what we do when school isn't virtual. So if we have a student who's been absent frequently, or a student who comes to school but is maybe disaffected or not handing in schoolwork, it sounds like a similar plan where the teachers try to reach out to the children. If that doesn't work, the parents, if that doesn't work, to guidance. So it sounds very similar. So
it might be similar.
As the teacher, from one teacher to another, there's just certain best practice that we do in teaching, like communication, and the more of it we do and the more purposefully we do it, the better off it is for the students. Good point. Thank you.
Thanks.
I just wanted to add, Robin, it might sound like a similar practice, but the problem we have now is that we're not seeing the students. in a classroom, you could see a student, you could see when they're having a problem. When they're at home, we might be missing that.
If you want to, if there's no other further questions or comments about the committee update, I do want to introduce our Director of Science, Health, and Physical Education at this time, Devin Orozco. She is going to give us a quick presentation on the score reports for the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment for Science that we recently received for last year's administration. So Mr. Orozco, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Oh boy, there we go. So we received our scores from the standardized science assessments that were given last May, the week before we started virtual home instruction. So we just received all of these scores. Unfortunately, all of the paper scores are still in central office, but as soon as we return to the buildings, we'll be able to give individual scores out to students and families. But for now, we at least have the district-wide score presentation for you. So to give you a little bit of a background, the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment in Science is a federally required state assessment that was administered to students in grades 5, 8, and 11. So it's very similar to the New Jersey Ask, if you remember that one, but this is the new version of that. So the new version was developed in collaboration with teachers, with the Department of Ed, and with science vendors. Our scores are here for you to see. So for some reason, the New Jersey SLA in Science has 4 levels of achievement: level 1, 2, 3, and 4, the highest level being a 4. The descriptors that they've given to these levels are a level 1 indicates minimal knowledge and skill in science. A level 2 would indicate a limited knowledge and skill in grade appropriate science. A level 3 would be a grade appropriate understanding of science skills and knowledge. And a level 4 is an advanced understanding of science content and skills. So for our grade 5 students in the state, 29.2% of students achieved a level 3 or 4, which would be considered the acceptable level. Kind of like a proficient, but they haven't actually labeled it as proficient. And our district scored on an average of 42.3% of our students achieved that level, so well above the state average. Our 8th grade students, the state average was a 19.8, so 19.8% of students achieved that level 3 or 4, and in our district we were at a 28.3% of our students achieved that level. And then in the 11th grade, the state, 27.3% of students achieved that level 3 or 4, and in our district, 22.3% of students achieved that level 3.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do you have it broken? Well, I see you going to the next. I don't expect you to say it out to everybody, because I know you can't say with children and stuff like that. And I don't want to know the children, but I want to know you have it broken down where the children that are having problems, you're going to be addressing that?
So we do have,
that are not achieving this?
We do have student level data. Unfortunately, like I said, we just received it before we came home. So we actually don't have all of the reports that I would like to have in my hands at this time, but they are at the district. We do have some school-based data. And what I like about the school-based data that we got is that it actually breaks down not just the level and the score, but and I don't remember if this is later on in the presentation, but the score reports on the students tell us what areas of science we excelled in and where we were closer to the state average. In the 5th and the 8th grade, we weren't below the state average in anything. So our students did very well on that, but we have an idea of how our students performed on each content area. So life science, physical science, and earth and space science. And then also how they did with the various skills, because this new assessment is not just based on content knowledge, it's largely based on how they apply their skills, how they use questioning and modeling and using math in science. So yes, we do have more detailed information, and we will be using that. Unfortunately, we got
Okay,
it.
one more question.
Sure.
Oh, okay, one more question. In 11th grade, what science are they working on?
So the 11th grade
Could you hear me?
assessment is given to all students in 11th grade, regardless of what course they're taking. So for our students, we have students who are taking an AP level physics class. We have students who are taking a college prep level physics class. We have students taking AP chemistry. We have students taking college prep chemistry. We have students in advanced placement biology, in anatomy, in environmental science. They could be taking any one of a number of science classes in that 11th grade. And by 11th grade, they've now taken almost 3 full years of science, but they could have taken any number of a variety of classes.
Okay.
Ms. Orozco, I have a question for you, and you can probably pin it to the end, but I just want to, looking at the 11th grade numbers and the drop off that seems to happen, wondering, if there's a plan in place or a plan has started to be discussed to focus on high school science.
Yes, there are, there are some plans in place. Unfortunately, the state gives us loose guidance, I'll say, in terms of what classes our students should be taking when it comes to science. So a physics class isn't required by the 11th grade, yet there are physical science concepts that are on that assessment. So it's really a state level conversation, I, along with many of my colleagues and peers, about how do we make sure that all of our students receive instruction in all of the standards in science if they're going to be assessed this way. So now that we've seen the assessment and we've seen what's on there, it's a much larger conversation now that it's happening.
But doesn't that sort of lead down the path of teaching to the test in the 9th, 10th, and 11th grades versus letting the children pursue their individualized learning plans and understand, what sciences appeal to them? I guess that's the dichotomy you have to address.
Yes, it does, which is exactly why we haven't mandated a course sequence in science yet.
So then I guess my conclusion would be that the 11th grade numbers really need to be taken with a grain of salt and don't necessarily reflect on poor performance so much as they reflect on a diversity of science education that's happening within the school and the fact that it doesn't necessarily meet the test.
Exactly right. So yeah, one of the notes that I would make is that those 11th grade students from 9th to 11th grade do not have the same science experience, either from their peers or their peers across the state. And another option that I didn't even include in there is our vocational students who are in a vocational program starting in their 11th year. They take their science in their vocational school. So they're not even receiving science instruction in Middletown anymore. They're probably receiving it in their vocational school, which is an application-based science class. It's not going to be a physics class or a chemistry class like we might have.
Got it.
So it
Right,
is.
thank you.
I'm twitching in my seat over, as a former high school principal, I'm twitching in my seat over here, and I promise not to pontificate and to be concise. But the issue for me is, as you've already hit on, personalized learning, but authentic learning opportunities. So by the time our students they're really at a level where they've matured to a level of independent thinking, and they're in 11th grade, they want an assessment that really matters to them. So the assessment in 11th grade that really matters to them, as we know, is the ACT, the SAT. They've moved on to what it is they need to do to go to the next level of their education, as well as their quarterly assessments, subject-specific quarterly assessments, and those indicators that have an impact on their grades. So that's the problem with multiple state assessments on the high school level that we as educators have been identifying to the state for a significant period of time. By the time we get to high school, those assessment measures must be authentic. And unfortunately, as we said, when it's not clear what they're being assessed on or how it relates to the course they're in, they don't see the why. And that's an issue for us.
Absolutely.
Not to say as a competitive person that I accept that we're below the state average. Let me be very clear about that. I do not accept that. I don't think any of us accept that. I know our teachers don't accept that. I know we'll put action plans in place to improve upon that. We're not making excuses We're just saying there are other indicators that we perform much better on, and those indicators seem to be very authentic, subject specific, and or assessments that relate to opportunities beyond high school. And at 11th grade, that's where our students are thinking.
Absolutely, especially the week after Memorial Day when they take this assessment.
Week after Memorial Day. Yeah.
You know. All right, so another little summary slide. So we do have approximately 700 students per grade taking the assessment. So we did have pretty good representation of all of our students taking the assessment. And then the frequently asked questions here are from the state. These are included in the letter that will be given out to all the families when they do receive their score report. So again, just to give you some more of the background, we did need a new test. So this was the first year that this test was used and scored. It was the second year of implementation, but the first year that the test was used was simply a field test, and we never even received those scores. So I have no idea what to compare these scores to from a year before or the year before that. These are based on new standards. So we have many things to learn and hopefully some score reports to analyze and see, not necessarily what content knowledge, but maybe what skills we can make sure we're using in all of our science classes so that our students can apply those skills regardless of their interest level in the content. Another one of the big questions is, again, what are these scores being used for? So CUSAC in 2021, 2022 will be the first year that these results will be used. And that'll be used from the results from the 2020-2021 administration. So even if we were administering this year, which we're not, they would not be utilized yet. So the next time we do receive scores may be when they're used for CUSAC. But again, this was released right before virtual home instruction. And another important point is that this assessment and passing this assessment is not a state graduation requirement. It's a federally mandated assessment, but not a graduation requirement. And it does look different from the NJ Ask. If you're familiar with the NJ Ask, this is much more skills-based than it is content and knowledge-based. And it is a digital assessment. It looks very similar to the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment in science, or in math and in English language arts. We are using the data in whatever ways we can. So we'll be used to look at our curriculum and see, like I said, where can we infuse some of these science practices in our classes, even if it's not all of the content in all of our courses. Where can we use those skills so that we can still allow our students to take the classes that they're interested in and learn science authentically. And then there are resources on the state website with how the test was created, what we can use the results for, and then some score report information. I believe that's it. Any other questions on the science score reports or the data?
None here.
Thank you, Devin. Can you walk us through a little bit for the public as the sort of things that you might change, you might look into changing to improve those scores?
Sure. So what we are doing now is we're rewriting, as we rewrite our curriculum, what we're making sure of is that a lot of the courses are based on, there's been a shift to phenomenon-based science. So instead of starting out a lesson with, today we're going to talk about density, we're going to start looking at, why do ice cubes float in your water? So we're trying to approach science from more of a relevance standpoint than we are from content. And that is what the new standards are truly based in, is how do we use science? How do we use our skills in science, like asking questions, making models, using math. So we're really focused on those skills and how they're present in our science classrooms, and not so much memorization of content.
Great, I like that. And one more question, this is more of a question for Dr. George, I guess. Can you give us a little bit of a run through of what you might do? We're doing such a great job with the virtual learning, but I'm wondering what kind of things we might have to do in the fall or whenever we get back to school to bridge that gap for the children who might fall behind during this virtual learning time.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's one that it's an ongoing discussion. We're following a lot of research right now about the potential of the summer slide as it relates to virtual learning, having those discussions with our administrative team. So to kind of have action plans in place. I think maybe another thing I'm very proud of, particularly with our elementary students, is the work that has been done by the work that's been done with in our virtual learning initiative with our elementary programs, because having a significant number of students already complete benchmark assessments, and we've been sharing those numbers as part of our newsletter and our communication both with the board and the public. I think it's very rare what we're doing with Imagine Learning on the elementary level to have benchmark assessments completed by between 80 and 85% and started by upwards of 95% and just a few weeks after implementation. So I think we have a clear indication, most importantly, on where our elementary students are with those benchmarks. But I think that ongoing communications, subject specific on the secondary level, grade level communications on the elementary level of where each student is kind of in our model, what we are with our personalized learning. I think that we need to continue to stay in those conversations to make sure we minimize that summer slide or that virtual slide, you might say, as we prepare for next year. So that's a really good question.
Well, thank you very much. I know that a lot of the districts will be looking to us for guidance and leadership, and I thank you for that. You've done a fantastic job. Thanks.
It's a team effort. Team.
Mrs. Caruso, I think you were going to discuss, I had previously mentioned we had to make some adjustments to our board regulation regarding grading.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
You're a little low. I think somebody might need to mute because I think we're getting some background noise, but a little bit louder, Mrs. Caruso, if you could.
Sounds like kids yelling.
Not mine. District Regulation 2624 is the grading system regulation. The policy does not need to change, but in order for us to consider all possibilities as we discuss what is best for the students with regards to grading during virtual instruction, our secondary grades, the only statement there was that we use a 100-point grading scale. It's possible that we might consider not using numbers, but as some of the colleges and some of the schools, K-12 schools in the area have done, some people are using pass-fail and some other options. That's not even mentioned in our grading system. So therefore, one sentence was added to section E 1B that says, in emergency situations, such as when school may need to transition to online, the use of a P for pass or F for fail may be incorporated as necessary. Okay, so that gives us the option, if need be, of using that. All right, that's the, any question about that?
Yeah, Ms. Caruso, it's Nick. What is the implementation strategy if we were to choose to go in that direction? And would it be across the district at different grade levels? How would that work?
That's still being discussed, Mr. Franco. That no decision has been made. At length it has been discussed, as Mrs. Pikas referenced to earlier. Students are involved, teachers are involved. There were meetings last week, there'll be meetings next week. So we haven't worked out for sure a definitive answer. We have some things we'd like to do, but we're not there yet. But as soon as we know, we'll be happy to share it with you. But we wanted to at least leave the possibility of not using a number, in the policy. That was all we're doing at this point, as far as the regulation goes.
And to your point, Mr. DeFranco, and as Mrs. Caruso has alluded to, it may be on an individualized as needed basis. As Mrs. Minuez has pointed out, this current situation is affecting students very differently. So more so than ever, we're probably going to need to, consider a personalized approach, not just to teaching and learning, but also to how we assess and report student performance.
So I know that at the high school level, for the third quarter quarterly, the students are given the option to effectively drop the quarterly grade and not have it count to their average. Is there consideration to do that with the fourth quarter as well, or because that's traditionally an exam quarterly, that would remain in place?
we're exploring all options at this point, up to and including not even administering it. So all options are on the table at this point, and we continue to solicit the feedback of students and teachers in making that determination.
Do we have any sort of a sense of how many high school students availed themselves of dropping the third quarter quarterly?
Mrs. Walker, I don't know if Mrs. Calabro was able to generate that report yet or not. I don't know if she's been able to retrieve that data out of Power School just yet, Mr. DeFranco.
Yeah, we're
Okay,
still
just
working on
curious.
getting all that data, yeah.
No worries. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm sorry. It's Pam. I'm sorry, I can't hear you guys that well. Are you saying that we may go to a pass fail on a case by case or district wide?
We're exploring all options. Right now, we just
Okay.
want the option to exist. Interestingly enough, when we met with both the student representatives at the high school level, as well as the teachers, both groups in different meetings expressed concern with just making a quick pivot to pass fail for different reasons. Even the students had concern about that. But as Dr. George said earlier, what we're most interested and committed to doing is making sure that none of our students in Middletown are negatively impacted in terms of their grades, their transcripts, because of this current situation. So we want to make sure that we fully vet out all options to ensure that that all students are equitably able to demonstrate what they have been able to learn over this period.
Yeah, I just
And
don't want to
these are
give up
one
on
of
these
those
kids. They're working so hard. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. And these are one of these situations I'm saying that in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity, because just today we had the opportunity in following up with teachers in our meeting with teachers, central office administrators, building level administrators, and teachers on what they thought grading should look like. Then we as a central office team reached out to districts across the state, the county across the state, looked at how they were doing grading, and our building level administrators had follow-up meetings with teachers. And then we came back together saying, okay, here's what our teachers in high school north are saying. Here's what our teachers in high school south are saying. We got great feedback. Here's what we're saying on the state level. Let's take all this back before we make a final decision, just as everyone's pointing out, to make sure that there are no students that are left behind.
Or that any student, to Mrs. Rogers' point, who is excelling or really putting forth great effort isn't negatively impacted by a decision as well.
When you see 95% of kids logging on in the middle of a global pandemic, logging on to Imagine Learning, I think that's incredible. And I just want to support them as much as we can. I think if we do it case by case, pass fail, I understand some people are not adapting well to the virtual learning, but on the whole, I am so impressed by what you guys are doing, and I just want to keep the positive energy going.
We agree.
Yeah, and not only logging on to Imagine Learning, but completing assessments. 85, 80% completing, not just daily work. And that's goal one for us. We want them to complete their daily work. We want them to work to mastery on the curriculum, but completing benchmark assessments, there are very few on the elementary level, districts, statewide, even nationwide, that are able to really get to that level of implementation where we've got benchmark assessment data as it relates to mathematics and language arts. So to your point, yeah, absolutely. And like I said earlier, we have those group of students that do really well in traditional environments, that do it really well in here. And we want to make sure, and we were having this conversation today, that A just is an A for them. If A is a 90 and they're at a 95 or 97, we were making sure that they're getting their 95 or their 97, right, Kim? So that's to that point. But then at the same time, there are those kids who are doing better in this platform than they were doing previously. And we want to make sure those kids get the opportunity for that improvement. And then the other thing is, since, when we're looking at the quarterly assessments, what they look like, whether or not you're given a fourth marking period quarterly assessment, if you're not, what type of things can you put in place to make sure that students have every opportunity to work towards mastery, get additional assignments, go beyond the regular assignments so that they can get that grade that they deserve? Not just a 90 when they have a 92, but actually a 92. So yeah, Completely agree.
Yeah.
And those conversations we're having them every day. And in the middle of this opportunity where we're not driving to work, we're just logging on every morning, first thing in the morning, and we're on all day, making sure that we're having the follow-up conversations with all of the stakeholders, the students, the teachers, the building level administrators. So we got to really, I feel like for myself, I have a better finger on my pulse now, than I normally would, just because I'm talking to so many constituents.
And you bring
Yeah.
up a good point, Mrs. Rogers, and I just want to further expand upon what you and Dr. George were saying. Some members of the community may wonder why in the middle of a situation like we're experiencing now, in a virtual environment as well, would we place importance on benchmark assessments, you know, or even having students complete benchmark assessments? But when you follow the most relevant research and most recent research, and where planners are looking forward to the fall, we really need to have a firm understanding of real time where students stand in terms of their understanding and ability to meet expectations for grade level standards. So that come September, or in June, if we're back in session, we can pick right back up and continue their learning, and from a place where they currently exist, and move them forward, and not waste time in that moment trying to determine where that place is. We are keeping that up we are keeping that assessment in real time and that determination in real time, so that we can put the measures in place when we do return to those classrooms immediately to continue moving them forward and address whatever gaps have been created, or enrich students who have excelled during this time.
Thanks, Mrs. Pekas. It's Robin. Again, I'm so thrilled with what everyone has accomplished. The entire, all the directors and central office team and all the teachers. I'm so proud. Great job, everybody.
So another thing that we incorporated during this virtual instruction period is a virtual AP review day for our AP students. And I think Ms. Brosco was going to give us a brief update and summary of how that went.
Sure. So on Saturday, April 18th, a Saturday, we had an AP review day that ran from about 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. I counted about 18 sessions of our AP teachers offering help to our students. That was basically test prep. So we were hoping to be able to do things like practice tests if we were in the buildings. But obviously this review day looked a little differently than it normally would. So we had anywhere from a handful of students to over 50 students engaged in some of our larger class sessions. The teachers held Google Meets, and students were able to drop in and out of the 2-hour sessions that they held. And so we tried to stagger those sessions so that students could go to multiple if they wanted to, or they could just spend a few minutes in one and then hop over to another. And the teachers gave very positive feedback. Some of them were actually pleasantly surprised at how engaged the students were and how many showed up and how they were still able to do test prep in a very virtual environment. Many had expressed concerns about the students not really needing it because they had extra time at home, but it turned out the students were very grateful for the extra time that they had with their teachers. And the feedback that I heard from some of the students that I've heard from was also very positive. And again, they thought that it was very valuable, and they were able to really focus on test prep instead of all the content and the skills that they normally are when they're doing their classwork.
One of the things that we've heard from our students when we meet with them is the importance, even from an emotional standpoint, of being challenged academically, the way they would be if they were in that more traditional environment for a significant number of our students. So in listening to those conversations, I can't say, Ms. Orozco, I'm surprised that on a Saturday in a virtual hangout, we would have that number of sessions, and that just speaks volumes of what a great job our students have done in this moment, as well as our teachers, to really keeping everyone engaged and involved, or as many students as possible. So I really, 2 thumbs up to that. That's awesome. Thank you.
3 thumbs up, 4 thumbs up. I did that. Google Meets is fantastic. I feel like even if, you know, I'm having a down day, my children are getting their teachers and a Google Meet with all their friends and just putting them in a really good mood. And I don't know if you guys know how much good you're doing for this district. It really means a lot to the moms and moms and dads. And I just want you guys to know.
Okay, I think Mrs. Caruso is going to give us a quick update. They are making alternate plans for things such as
Right. Okay.
scholarship night.
Yes. 2 weeks ago, I met with a group of guidance counselors from each of the 2 high schools to discuss what we will do if we're not in school at the time we normally have our awards night at High School South and at High School North. And we went back and forth with a few ideas, and we realized that obviously we would have to do some sort of a digital presentation announcement of the scholarship awards, which the counselors are very busy working on now with the people that provide the money for the scholarships. And we've done many interviews. All of the High School South interviews were done in person before we began virtual instruction. We did all of the High School North interviews virtually, and it went extremely well, surprisingly well. And right now we're working on who will be getting what award, et cetera. But when it's time to announce those awards, I wrote up the recommendations of the counselors and myself and shared it with both of the high school principals who were good with this, and also with Ms. Pickus. And what we'll be doing is on June 11th, at exactly the same time, on the district website, we're going to post, with Mr. Riccolo's help, post a digital presentation announcement of what students are getting each of these scholarship awards. There's quite a few of them. So there's approximately 170 in each school that we present each year. So we're trying to make this expedient because it can be very boring to watch 170 names. So we tried to cut things down so that only monetary scholarship awards are part of this presentation. And it'll begin, of course, with a welcome from the principals and a congratulations, then the roll of the awards and a brief explanation of those awards that are memorial awards in particular. That's important. And it will end with the counselors doing some sort of congratulations for the students as well. So please stay tuned on June 11th on the website during the day at exactly the same time. Students will all be informed by the guidance counselors of when this is happening so that people are aware. And I'm telling everybody now, you know, formally, that June 11th on the website, expect the presentation of the scholarship awards so everybody can do that for both of the high schools, 2 separate presentations. Any questions about that one? In addition to which, as you may recall, back in March, we intended to commend the students who earned, the 32 students who earned the Seal of Biliteracy this year. It was our first presentation, our first offering of the Seal of Biliteracy in Middletown. And we're very proud of the 32 students who did earn that. Unfortunately, we were not in school and we were not able to do those commendations in person. So Mr. Riccolo kindly put that all into the last newsletter last Friday, announcing who those students are. And then he very nicely volunteered to do a digital presentation for that as well that he is working on and will be putting out. Okay. Questions about that? Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Mrs. Alphone, I think you wanted to brief the board on plans A, B, C, all the alternative plans we are devising for our summer opportunity for academic readiness program.
Yeah, so I touched upon it a little before, you know, moving away from the typical candidate pool that we do look to service within that program, which is geared towards our intervention students in grades K to 8. We are going to be expanding the offerings to include students who are also struggling academically due to the slide that could be felt from virtual home instruction, and also expanding to include students with IEPs that are also struggling but do not qualify for ESY. So we are looking at the dates currently of July 27th through August 21st. We pushed it back purposefully a few weeks to try to coincide it as closely as possible to the start of the school year. You know, we just felt there needed to be that natural break, especially if virtual home instruction continues beyond the May 15th date. We felt it was of a greater benefit to have it coinciding with the start of the school year than back to an already challenging end of the school year. I have already sent out information for teachers to make recommendations to for students to participate in that program. We've already created a posting and advertised to our teachers the potential for working within that program. And we have a couple of different scenarios we're looking at. Obviously, it's going to depend a lot on if we are able to physically come back to school sites, or if there is going to have to be a partial reimmersion into school sites. So we're thinking of, it could be fully on site, it could be a hybrid of virtual and off-site learning, which could include pieces of Imagine Learning. There is an additional layer within that platform that we haven't touched yet, and that is the actual the assignment of differing pathways for students who are struggling based on those benchmark results. So we do have more that we can tap into there. So it could be a combination of all three. If we are allowed back on site limitedly, plus virtual in-person instruction, and maybe even potentially an added layer of Imagine Learning. So, you know, the biggest thing for us is we're looking at how to start to address some of these deficits and difficulties that we may be seeing from students being in the virtual environment. Because as many of my colleagues have said, even though we are doing a fantastic job, there are still going to be things that cannot be covered in the same regard that they would have been covered in an in-person setting. So, you know, for instance, phonics instruction at the K1 and 2 level. That is intimate in-person instruction that is the most effective. Now, we are doing a great job of getting exposure to our students, but we are knowing and understanding that we're going to have to remediate some things there at the K1 and 2 level upon reentry back into you know, a traditional environment. But you know, those will all be pieces of our summer program. And again, the main thing is the expansion to include other students that are now potentially at risk for different reasons. You know, they're not the kids that traditionally would only have been at risk, but now, you know, there's other factors that are impacting that scenario. So, you know, hopefully I am feeling that we are going to get a large turnout. We are going to get many parents that are also concerned about this, that will, I think, be willing to support their children's participation. So, you know, we're months ahead right now in identifying these students. We usually don't do this till our third benchmark happens. But because we have fresh benchmark data from Imagine Learning and at the elementary level, we're now up to 95% completion on both of those areas in the benchmark. You know, a week or 2 weeks into implementation. So that's amazing. And we have those results now, and we can use that to start to make some determinations coinciding with teacher information and input about who should be invited. And also another piece of this is, what skills and concepts do we need to remediate on? Because time is of the essence. So we need to be able to get down to a very, very specific level in order to really hone in to the areas that students are, you know, experiencing difficulties in a timely manner. So that's also part of this process is getting that information from the teachers as well, because they're going to be the ones at this point coinciding with that benchmark data of the most intimate information about each student's, you know, learning needs after we, you know, kind of end this virtual home instruction phase. Any questions?
Thank you. Do you have any suggestions for parents who want a little help helping them through the virtual instruction, giving them some pointers?
You
Like,
give
I'm
me some
serious.
pointers.
I know, right?
You know, I think time guidelines or time structures are really important, especially for little kids. And also giving them some most teachers are putting out a full like menu of assignments for the day. For me and my own kids, I'm just using them as an example. I have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old who, you know, obviously can be resistant at times to having to do the tasks that are traditionally done in the home. But I let them choose, like, what do you want to do first? Tell me 3 things you're going to pick to do now. You know, set them up in a quiet spot, set timers. You know, kids function well with structure. So I think the more structured choice we can provide them within, based on what the teachers are putting out there as content. I think the better. And also, I always require my kids, even if it's not required, to get on the meets and the chats, because that's the social emotional piece. Like, they need that connectivity. And if I always say, at the end of the day, if that's the thing that they did that made them happy and connected them, then that's good enough. Like, to me, we want them access to the content, but their social well-being is obviously the foremost thing that I think we're all, definitely 100% saying, like, if anything, it has to be that.
I agree. Would you say starting at 9 a.m. like they normally do, because that's their normal day?
Yeah,
would help?
routines.
Okay,
Routines are,
yeah.
I mean, the more routine you can keep, the better. I think if there's an expectation and a routine, but also choice within that tends to work really well with all kids, but particularly elementary school kids. They need the structure, but I think they also like to feel that they have a little bit of control over the situation, especially in a world where they don't have much control right now. None of us do.
Right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I want to reinforce that's some feedback that we got from the students as well. That sticking to their normal routine has helped them stay pace with completing assignments and getting through their work. I also just would want to add to what Mrs. Alphone just said, I almost called you Ms. Shaw, is parents need to also incorporate breaks during the day. I've spoken to a couple parents who are struggling with maintaining student stamina in getting projects or tasks completed. It's important for parents to realize that throughout the school day, students are often given breaks, natural brain breaks, opportunity to get the wiggles out at the younger grade, at the older grades, movement between different activities, rotation between centers or collaborative groups or book clubs, they're happening at the middle school and high school level, different station work. That movement and those natural breaks is really important. So if you're mom or dad at home and you're not incorporating breaks, please start to do so. The general rule of thumb forever when it came to teachers, and I haven't seen anything to suggest this has changed, is like 5 to 10 minutes per grade level is about the time that a student can maintain high levels of stamina on any given task. So in kindergarten, think in terms of every 10 minutes or so, maybe switching up the routine, giving a little bit of a break, even if it's a minute or two, and obviously, that 10-minute increment increases with each grade level. So in terms of like being able to sit at a table and attend, a second grader, 20 to 30 minutes might be their max before they need that break. So it's really important that parents, that we share that with parents, I think.
Mrs. Pekas, and it's important too, I think this addresses this is a question we've gotten with Imagine Learning. When we rolled this out, we did put in some time guidance, which is really, really important. This is not a completion program. This is not something you can finish in a day, a week, a month. Like, it is a learning platform and there is instruction built in. So we put that time guidance out very purposefully. So that way we were not having any student participate on something that was going to drive them to a place of frustration. There has to be productive struggle, but we also want them to operate in those time guidances because they're purposeful, they're developmental, and they're with intention to give kids the opportunity to kind of to productively struggle a little bit, but to also not get them to a place of frustration. So, especially on those Tuesdays and Thursdays where elementary students are utilizing those two platforms, we really, really have been strongly encouraging teachers and parents to have the conversation of, put on a timer and when it's done, it's done. Like, that's it. We close it off for the day and we start again the next day.
Thank you, Mrs. Alphone.
Thank you.
Megan, I think you were going to update the board on recent NJDOE guidance regarding teacher evaluation in its day.
Yes, good evening, everyone. We were very anxious when school closed, wondering how this was going to impact the teacher and administrator evaluation cycle. Fortunately, on April 15th, the New Jersey State Department of Education did offer some very helpful and very precise guidelines that enabled us to move forward. I think the most important thing that you should know is that these guidelines are in place for this year only, and that the department has said that due to, the school-wide closures due to COVID-19, the NJDOE districts with guidance so we can be flexible, still meet the Achieve NJ guidelines for educator evaluations for all teachers, principals, assistant principals, and all other certified staff. But they recognize that there's been a significant disruption to the evaluation cycle, and that the lack of evidence that we have regarding people's performance should not negatively impact the overall integrity of the educator's score. So therefore, they've come up with the following guidelines. For all tenured certificated staff, teachers, principals, administrators, and any other certificated staff, if they are tenured, they are going to be looked at to be sure they're in good standing. And I'm happy to say our entire tenured staff is in good standing. That means that last year their rating was either effective or highly effective. And since that is the case, they are all going to get what the state is calling a not evaluated score. It will just read NE on the summative rating that we report to the state. For all non-tenured teachers, principals, and other certified staff, they do have to get a summative rating. And that's going to be recorded locally and at the state level. The non-tenured scores are going to be based upon observations that were completed prior to March 16th, which was the date that Middletown transitioned to virtual home instruction, virtual learning. And they could have had up to 3 evaluations. However, the state is saying that as long as they had a minimum of 2 of the 3 evaluations, that what we're going to do is take those evaluations, simply average the scores of those 2 evaluations, and that will become their summative score for this year. We do have 190 non-tenured teachers. We have 11 non-tenured administrators. And at this time, I am not only very pleased, but I'm very grateful to the entire Human Resources Department to be able to report that all 190 teachers have been assigned new summative forms. We had to go into MLP and completely reinvent the wheel. They've all received new summative scores. We've tallied all of their evaluations from their observations. They all now have a summative score. Those reports are available for them to see in My Learning Plan, which is our teacher evaluation record keeping system. And every one of the reports has been assigned to an administrator. Another requirement that the state has is that there will be a summary conference between the administrator and the non-tenured staff member. Obviously, those are going to be virtual conferences. And once those virtual conferences take place, and I looked in My Learning Plan today, and there are some people that are just rolling with it and getting on them immediately, contacting teachers, setting up appointments, whether it's through Zoom or Google Meets or Google Hangouts or FaceTime, to arrange for those conferences. So I am confident, and I'm very pleased to say that we're in a very good state to meet the criteria that the state has put upon us to meet this year regarding the evaluation of all of our staff. And that was really the result of a huge effort of a large group of people. And I am very grateful and thankful to all of them. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we do have some items on the agenda this evening for your approval. That includes our annual renewals of our field trip destinations, our existing district curricula. There will be some new curricula that will be on future agendas for approval. As we discussed earlier, there are curriculum committees that are still meeting to develop those new curricula. and it's our renewal of licenses for Newsella, Linkit, and Brain Pop Jr. Are there any questions about any of those items that are on the agenda for approval?
No, thank you. My kids love them all.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's it. That's finally it for curriculum and instruction.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
So I guess we're moving on to student activities.
Yes, student activities. I wanted to give you an update on the YMCA. As you know, they were doing counseling in our all 12 buildings this year of students. And when we went virtual, they shifted their counseling services from face-to-face interventions to the telehealth. And they use phone and video conferencing. During the month of March, there was a total of 258 counseling sessions for 102 clients. And we don't have the stats for April, but we know that they're still continuing with those telehealth conferences. They have started virtual tutoring using our staff. They also have a daycare for essential workers in the town, and 2 of our school nurses have volunteered to conduct wellness checks throughout the day of these students as required. They take their temperature and they go through a checklist of the staff and the students a couple of times during the day. And also registration for next year, the 2021 before aftercare opens on May 4th. I also wanted to give you an update on the mental health and community well-being activities that are going on. Our counselors, SACs, and SBSSs are all doing check-ins with students via Google Hangout, Gmail, phone calls. They've set up Google time slot appointments and office hours for virtual counseling. They each have Google Classrooms with resources for mental health, helplines, positive messaging, coping skills, daily challenges, etc. And they're collaborating with and referring our students as needed to community health, mental health resources. Crisis intervention, Mr. Ranella worked with the high school counselors and SACs to create a virtual crisis intervention program early into our virtual home instruction. We were the first in the state to create such a plan, so they were asked to present it at a NJDOE webinar with over 1,000 participants, and we're really, proud of them for setting this up and basically teaching the rest of the state how it's done. Our nurses have been really active also. They're active with our families. They've set up their Google Classrooms. They have links to health education, resources. They put tips up for exercising, healthy eating, sleep habits. They have appropriate education on the coronavirus and risk reduction and health promotion activities. They're promoting awareness, self-awareness and mindfulness information and activities like little yoga moves and stuff like that during the day, coping skills and conflict resolutions. But in the greater community, they're also doing fundraisers and other activities. They did a fundraiser for Middletown Helps Its Own and raised over $4,600. They're helping with food distribution. They set up a food exchange. They're working with students to draw pictures, then sending them to people in isolation for the coronavirus. They're checking in with students with chronic medical conditions. All of our nurses have volunteered to work with the Middletown Health Department. And what they're doing is they're working to trace contacts of people that are tested positive. And then they're counseling the people that tested positive. They're counseling the contacts, giving them all kinds of education on how they can, quarantine and that type of thing. I really think that they're really doing a great job for Middletown and keeping, the people that should, the contacts that should be in quarantine, in so that they're not spreading the disease. Also, Eileen Gavin was asked to be on a state committee to develop protocols for when we return to school. So that's really great, that we're going to have firsthand knowledge of, what is expected of us when we return, because it may look very different and we may have to put, certain things in place that, that way we'll be prepared for it. We have 2 voting items, and they are 2 research studies. One is by Dr. Lily Steiner of Monmouth University, and she's going to be working at Navasync to teach parents how to work with their students in mathematics for mathematics homework. and that's voluntary. And then we also have Donna Ferrero from Georgian Court, and she's going to do a survey for teachers on social emotional learning strategies based on responsive classroom. And again, it's voluntary. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Mary Ellen, I just want to know, how do we identify the students who are in need for all of these programs with the mental health and community well-being?
It's a number of ways. Teachers can identify them. Parents call up can identify them. They already had students, you know, whether it's the nurse or the counselors, they already had students that they were working with. They are constantly checking in and keeping in contact with those students. Again, like we talked about the protocols, if there's students that don't show up to school for 2 or 3 days, they're in contact with them, finding out why they're not there. Are they having, is there some kind of health issue in the house? Are they having some kind of, you know, issue that they need some support with? Or is it just, you know, motivation? We have to get them motivated to get back on and working.
That's great. Thank you. Are we ready to move on to shared services? For shared services, we didn't have a meeting on Monday, but I didn't know, Amy, if you wanted to give a little update.
There were just a couple of ongoing topics that I discussed with Mr. Mercantani, and they were related to the safe routes for school. First of all, the project over by River Plaza, the $1 million grant that we were awarded to do the work over there. And essentially what I was told was that the progress on getting that project together has somewhat slowed due to this pandemic, that it's hard to, get in communication with people and keep things moving. So they didn't really have much to update us on that. They are moving forward with an acquisition of a property in that area, which will allow for the, for the work to be done. So that is moving forward, but other than that, they didn't really have much to update. As far as the other project that is going on, the project over at Normandy Park, they are getting close to going out to bid on that project. The specs are nearly finished, so they'll keep us posted on that. And that was really all that we discussed.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
So we're moving on to strategic planning. Mr. Little, did you want to give the update?
I could try. Can you hear me?
I know, I was going to say, I'll jump in if we can't hear you.
All right, I appreciate that. We met with Schoolhouse Strategies, I think it was last week. We discussed just an overall format, basically taking the information that we received during the process and basically putting it into a format, basically putting it into five goals, talking about how we're going to break it out by committees that we already have. I don't have it in front of me, but it's what we talked about: social emotional learning. There's a financial track, there's a curriculum track, there's a special education track, and we have committees. We're in a committee structure, so we're going to do it that way. It was just talking about how to approach it. The timeline. For one item we have RFP out for is for a demographer, which I think is due it in a day at the end of this month. Actually, yeah, today. And we're going to start that process, which could take a couple months. The idea is to, I think, start getting a plan together by June to outline some of the items that we need to achieve. So we'll be breaking out in committees. The strategic planning committee will be overall just making sure all the committees are working hard towards a plan. And I think we agreed to try to get this some kind of high level structure by June. That was about it. And a lot of it was just talking about details, but a lot of it was also like the surveys we already done and based on the forums that we had. I don't know, you were there as well. Did I miss anything? Or Dr.
Yeah,
George?
no, we committed to telling the giving the public an update in May so that they could give us responses and put in their feedback, and then ultimately land on something in June that hopefully can be implemented by September 2020, depending on how long the demographer takes.
Right, but I think that in May, I don't think we have a plan fully. I don't think there's going to be. I don't think the expectations that there'll be the plan will be fully complete by May, though. I don't think. I think that depends on where certain components come in over the next month. We're talking about a few weeks from now.
Yeah. John and Pam, I just think it's important to stress to the public that what we're talking to Schoolhouse Strategies about now, what we're creating is not an action plan. So we are not developing a document that will have steps to be taken in order to do something, to do this, to do that. What we're creating is essentially the vision of where we want the district to be in 5 years and the guardrails around our decision-making, in order to get there. So this is more about putting a plan together so that in successive years on successive boards, when we want to do a project, when we want to spend some money, we're always asking ourselves, how does this feed into the strategic plan? How is this what the district agreed to and the public agreed to? So just to set expectations, with all of our constituents out there, the families and the taxpayers, we are not, developing a plan that says we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We're developing a plan that says this is what's important to the district and the community based on the sessions and the feedback and the surveys and everything that we collected over the past almost 6 months.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's important that you mentioned the public too, because they have been so instrumental in the strategic plan every step of the way. And people have been so candid coming up to the mic and sharing their personal stories with us. And that's really pushed us forward to finding solutions that work for everyone in the district. Had they not shown up, had they not come to those meetings, we wouldn't have known some of this stuff. And I just really applaud the people who came out, shared their stories, who filled out the survey. The 10,000 comments in the survey were very helpful to us. And I think we're going to come up with something that everyone can live with. There's going to be some difficult decisions to be made, but I do believe that we're going to come to these decisions together because we worked on it together as a community. And I think that's really important. And I think that's a credit to Schoolhouse Strategies, to Dave Hespy and to Lynn Strickland. I think they did a fantastic job. I think the administration worked.
And Pam, just to add on, yeah, just to add on, I guess to sort of wrap that up, is, John mentioned it, but I think it's worth repeating. One of the biggest bits of feedback that we got out of strategic planning, forums was the desire for an updated demographic study. And so, as John mentioned, that bid has gone out. We're expecting, responses at the end of this week. So, we are acting in accordance with what the public wants us to do, and we're not making decisions without having the latest and greatest data. So it just, again, it's worth reinforcing that we're, moving forward in this planning process, according to what we indicated in our forms.
Actually, the proposals were due last Friday. So we did receive some proposals that we, have not completely read yet, and we'll be posting them to the portal, but we did receive some proposals back and we need to start the review process.
I have a question. During the strategic planning meetings, we kept emphasizing that nothing would be implemented before 2021. Is that now off the table?
I don't think that anything will be implemented till 2021, but we were hoping to map it out in some detail by September of 2020. That way the public has a year to understand it and to prepare themselves for it.
So the goal is to have some kind of plan to be implemented by 2021, and the community will have time to partake in it.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and Joan, that's correct. And again, just to reinforce, what's being delivered now is the strategic plan that provides the vision. And then, as John said, in our committee structure, each committee will have a part to play in the action plan that is then presented to the public for the public's digestion and comment and final approval for the board sometime in late calendar 2020, so that it would then be able to be implemented for school year 2021. So there's a long-term aspect to this that can't really be downplayed. We're not, we're not acting in any way for the strategic plan that's not a step-by-step process. And that's why it sort of feels slow, like we've been talking about strategic planning since, the summertime last year. And it is a step-by-step, phased approach that we're taking.
So when you get this plan, are you going to discuss it with us as board members, or you're just going to give us the committee that we're on's part of it?
No, the plan has to be approved. Joan, the plan has to be approved by the board. So I don't understand why you asked that question.
Because I don't really know where we're going with this yet. I mean, when before this all started, like when we had all the meetings, we heard like certain keywords like technology. Technology was mentioned 220 times. In what way does that mean? How was it mentioned? I'm looking for the details because we kind of put it out in phases. And I'm not downplaying the way it was done. I think it's fine, but I'd like to understand it more. Like when people were talking about, I'm using technology because that was supposedly mentioned many, many times. How was it mentioned? How will it play into this plan? What were the parts of technology that people had concerns with? And the same with other areas.
So schoolhouse strategies, and John might be able to speak to this better, but schoolhouse strategies, when they met with the strategic planning committee and the administration a couple weeks ago, covered exactly that point: how to draw a line, or a lot of people understand the concept of traceability, where you start in one place and you end up in another place. You can sort of draw a line from point A to point B. And so how we will be able to draw a line from what was discussed at the forum, what was a consistent theme of the commentary, and then how that turns up in the draft plan that the committee presents to the board. So to answer your question directly, you should be able to see that technology, to give an example, came up 200 something times and was a very common topic. And so we will have a technology focus in these particular goals, and then we will be able to discuss that as a full board in public when we present the plan.
So we're going to know what the public's concerns were in that area.
Yeah, I think in the framework
Right now, we
document that
don't.
they gave us, in the framework document that Schoolhouse Strategies has already drafted for us, they spend a lot of pages talking about what the results of the public forums were. So that by no means is that getting any sort of a short shrift.
Can we get a copy of that article?
Dr. George sent it to us with his Friday update. It should be in your emails with Dr. George's Friday update. There's a link to it. It's Schoolhouse Strategies. Let me see what it's called. Draft. Mine is called Draft.
I have a question.
Middletown. Draft Middletown Strategic Plan Report Doc. Google Doc.
Good, Leonora.
Pam, I have a question, or maybe a suggestion. At this point that you've done all the research, you had all your meetings, you did everything, why can't we be involved as a board of the whole with the strategic plan? Instead of this going back and forth all over this, why can't it be a board of the whole coming together and hearing it straight from Schoolhouse Strategies and coming to an agreement?
Right. Well,
Why does
Schoolhouse
it have to be
Strategies
on
is
the
now
outside?
Right. Schoolhouse Strategies is now done with the process. Now we're taking it on. And what we're doing is we're sort of dividing and conquering, right? We already have our committees set up, and we'll deal with writing the plan with each of our individual committees, and then come together and present it to the full board and present it to the public.
But you're isolating part of this board while you're doing this.
Every board member is on a
Maybe
committee.
you wanted to bring us together.
But every board member is on a committee, and then we're coming together to present it. Every board member is on a committee, at least one. Yes.
And okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have committees, right?
I
So,
think it should be
you know,
the whole board.
that was a decision made by the board for whatever reason, right? So if we don't use the committees to do parts, for example, we have curriculum committee, you know, they've been working on curriculum all year. You know, it's not like they're going to put a plan together and then roll it out on their own. They're going to do what they normally do. They talk about different items and they bring them to the whole board. To have the whole board do it, I don't, like I said, if we were a committee of the whole, we would do that. It doesn't really make sense. In terms of what Schoolhouse gave us, it was the same information that they presented probably like at least 4 times in terms of the survey, what they heard, and then they just said, here, by the way, here's sort of a format you can use. They're not going to give us a plan. They just gave us sort of like a skeleton, if you will, to sort of an idea.
And it's
of how
all been influenced by the public, by all the input we got from the public and the survey.
And the one issue is going to be depending on what the topic is. I mean, you're going to have a timeline, right? It's a 5-year plan, so there's going to be dependencies. So if I'm doing special education, for example, I mean, there are a lot of dependencies there, right? So if you say, hey, listen, I want to do this year 1, 2, 3, 4, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to have to be sequential, and also a lot of other components that are going to be involved. So each area is going to have to sketch out certain items because there's going to be a certain level of unknown over the next couple of years, right? So the idea is that they put together what they have. You look at them as being subject matter experts. They've been involved in what's happening so far. Put it together. We take a look at it and then see where we roll out. And there'll be definitely some pieces that are not going to be fully complete. It's just going to be ideas of how we want to approach things year 1, year 2, year 3. And going forward, it's going to be something we have to revisit and revise, right? We have, COVID-19 situation in any given year, there could be any kind of different issues. We've had budget cut, we've had state funding cuts, we have this pandemic. So I think every year we're going to have to review it and say, okay, how do we modify it? Year 1, year 2, year 3, this is nice. Or, hey, in year 3, we expected we were going to have to come to the public to, talk about some of our facilities, but, something could change next year where, that gets thrown out the door, or, who knows, maybe we're not in the committee structure anymore. But I think that's the way we start. We need to start getting stuff fleshed out, and then we can kind of come back to the middle.
I think it sounds like a collaborative process.
And just to add on to that, it's a practical process because, there are 9 of us. We each have our own responsibilities outside the board as we're volunteers. And I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to draft an entire strategic plan and, involve those of us who maybe are not as interested in curriculum. Speaking for myself, I'm not an expert on curriculum, but we have board members on the curriculum committee and that's their passion. And so I trust those board members to look at, the output of a strategic planning process to look at the goals that we want to work towards and to present to the full board for my evaluation their opinion. Similar with the Finance and Facilities Committee, similar with the rest of our committees. I think that that's how boards get things done. The full board doesn't look at every topic. The committees look at the topic and deliver action items to the full board. And that's how we have to operate to be efficient, especially in this scenario where we all can't sit around the table and collaborate. We are all, the collaborative working is going to be done, over Zoom meetings and Google Hangouts and using Google Docs. So, the idea of sitting together as a committee of the whole for hours upon end is I don't even think it's feasible to get something done in the amount of time we have.
So I also think that that's why we want to do by committee a draft for the next meeting, so that we have a draft that we can share with the public on where we are before it gets finalized by the June meeting, right?
Where does overcrowding fit in?
So maybe I'll just, I pulled up the, some of the information that was discussed that night by Schoolhouse Strategies. So maybe I'll just frame the 5 goals that they identified based on community input and the meetings that we've had, survey data. 5 goals that they've identified that really embody the full strategic plan for 2020, 2025. That 5-year period is goal number 1 is social emotional learning. Goal number 2, equity and opportunity for all students. Personalized learning is goal number 3. 4 is community partnerships, and 5 is financial stability and a quality education for all students. I think, Joan, to your point, goal number 5 may weigh heavily in the idea of our district organizational structure and how we will need to operate in the future to achieve and maintain financial stability.
So are you saying it's goal number 5? It's a low priority on the strategic planning information?
No, they're not ordered by priority.
Yeah, no.
They're just 5 goals. And Joan, I think to fully answer your question, overcrowding is a problem, and the strategic plan guides how we solve that problem. So if the board comes to the table, as we discuss this, and there are multiple options, we have to weigh those options against the impact on social emotional learning, the impact on community partnerships, the impact on financial stability. We have to look at all 5 of those goals and say, how does this one approach to solving overcrowding meet those 5 goals? It's almost like we'll be scoring those approaches based on how they meet the goals, because there are easy approaches to overcrowding, there are hard approaches to overcrowding, but we need to pick the one that meets our goals. So I don't think it's right to say, what about overcrowding, or what about redistricting, or what about the price of lunch, or what about these particular things? It's, over the next 5 years, we have to solve a lot of problems. What about the decrease in state funding? What about the aging of our buildings? All of these things. In September, what about the fact that we may not be able to have our kids in the hallways at the same time in the high schools? What about the fact that we may only have to have half capacity in the classrooms? I mean, there are problems we're going to have to address, and we're going to have to address them all within the framework of the strategic plan. So that way we can say, as to use Dr. George's words, we can say with fidelity that we looked at the problem and we looked at our strategic plan, which was guided by the community, and we have come up with a solution that best fits Middletown and solves the problem.
I think it's important when we say overcrowding, we're talking about smaller class sizes, right? A decrease in class size. That was one of the top priorities of the district. So a lot of the strategic plan is riding on that goal of decreasing class sizes.
Well, I think we're talking about overcrowding too. It's schools that are over the number of capacity.
Right, but to ultimately get the class sizes smaller, right? District wide.
Well, but it's both. It's both, right, Pam? So it's, how do you solve overcrowding while also maintaining the ability to have an optimal class size and working within the constraints of the buildings that we have, and understanding that there may be additional constraints placed on us by, September coronavirus regulations? And how do you do all that with community input and fiscally responsibly? And then in 2022 and 2023, how do we solve the problems that we can't even envision right now? We don't even know what's going to happen in 2022, 2023, but that's why we'll have this framework to say, well, we're going to meet these problems head on using the guidelines that our community spent hours and hours talking to us about in 2019 and 2020.
Well, it just goes to my point when we started this. In 3 years from now, what we're working on in the strategic plan, there might be even more urgent issues that need to be addressed before that. Things will change.
Of course. And so we'll address those. I mean, hopefully we're all on the board together, working together to solve those problems. But whatever the board makeup is, they'll be solving those problems within the guidelines of our strategic plan that we've come up with this year, which is why it's so important, going back to what you said earlier, for the board to come together in consensus around the strategic plan. So we build the plan in committees, we bring it to the board, we bat it around, and then we come to a consensus.
All right.
Yeah, and I think, sorry.
Just go back to my original question. What committee does overcrowding fit under?
I feel like you're not understanding, Joan, because it doesn't fit under any committee, because it's a problem. So when the approaches to overcrowding are weighed, they get weighed in the context of what those finance and facilities have to say with a particular solution. What does social emotional have to say about a particular solution? So let's move off of overcrowding, for example. Let's talk about, at a high level, redistricting, right? You could argue, well, redistricting is easy. You just redraw the lines and pick the kids up here and move the kids over there. But that's a social emotional nightmare, right? You have to be much more careful.
Yeah, we just went through that.
Exactly. And so, but there's also a financial component, right? Because you have to look at the impact on transportation budget. You're going to need more buses. You have to look at the impact on curriculum, because does that mean you're going to need to move teachers here or there? And you have to look at the issue of equity, because by doing so, are you taking students away from specials that they may require? You moving kids? Is the impact of your move going to impact another community of learners that will then have to be moved? So it's a holistic approach. I don't think we can say, what about overcrowding or what about redistricting? I think we have to say, we approve a strategic plan, we come to a consensus, and then we make every decision going forward as a board within the guidelines and the guardrails of that strategic plan. So it's almost like we'll be scoring every idea that we have. I think there was a forum a number of months ago where one of our residents said, well, can we contribute ideas? And that's effectively what will happen, right? Ideas will come in, people will come to the mic and say, what about this, what about that? And any idea that we pursue will be scored against the goals laid out in the strategic plan.
Mrs. Stella wanted to get in here. Can I just let her in?
Nope.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
What I wanted to say before was that the way the strategic planning committee is describing this sounds like the most efficient use of the time and the skills of the people on the board. It doesn't really seem efficient for all of us to sit around together over and over, at a table doing it. I think that this sounds way more effective. So that's it.
And Robin, I think
Robin.
the thing we have to pay attention to, it's going to be rigorous as well. So
yes,
we're going to need you and Joan and Leonora and Tom and everybody to hold the committees that they're not on accountable to explain their decisions when they come and bring committee consensus to the board. So that there is a certain amount of rigor attached to it.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else from the board? So that concludes our committee reports. We did our personnel and executive session. So I'd like to move on to the public hearing and adoption of the 2020-2021 school district budget.
Okay, on the agenda tonight, we do have an item to adopt our final budget for the year. We actually have a presentation that's up on the website that I'm going to share with everyone now, and we can walk through any changes between the tentative budget and the final budget that we have had to make. So just give me a second here. Screen. So can everyone see that?
I can see it.
Okay. Okay, so just to remind everybody, and when we do our budget, we have to do our budget keeping these priorities in mind that are given to us by the New Jersey Department of Education. When we submit our budget to the New Jersey Department of Education, they do review our budget and they look for narratives from us in these particular areas and how our budget is addressing them. So again, we did present this with the tentative budget, but it's just always worth looking at again so that we stay focused on what we're supposed to be addressing. So our final budget summary, these numbers are exactly the same as what was presented with the tentative budget. Our 2021 budget proposes total revenues of $167,724,693, comprised of a increase in the tax levy of 2% plus the utilization of the current bank tap that the district has available that was generated in prior years of $1,059,281. Our state aid is per the state aid notice that we were given on February 27th and represents a reduction of $880,000 from the previous year. The other line items have been budgeted by the district based upon what we feel the projections will be for next year, with the exception of the semi-revenue, which is an amount that's determined by the state based upon our prior revenues, and they give you a number to budget in that area. The appropriations in our final budget are the same as the tentative budget with two exceptions, which are highlighted in green. We have made a reduction in regular programs and instruction. And I'll go to the next screen. We've made an increase in employee benefits, which is related to the health insurance. And you will see the total budget totals the $167,724,693 that we saw with the revenues. The changes between our tentative and final budget are primarily focused on the health benefits. As we went, we just heard from our broker the results of our marketing. When we did our tentative budget, we did include a reduction from what we had originally budgeted for insurance of $500,000 in the hopes that the marketing would realize that for us. But as we did state several times when we were presenting this, that was not something that was in any way, based upon renewal information we had at the time. We just, had a discussion amongst the administration and the board, and we were trying to be fair and say with all the other adjustments that we were making that we could potentially anticipate a reduction in this area. However, that did not come to fruition. So with that being a component of balancing our budget for the tentative budget, we then had to add that back, and we actually had to increase health benefits by about $581,000, more than what was reflected in the tentative budget. So to balance that, we took a look and we were able to identify some technology purchases that we had listed for next year's budget that we could move into the current budget to alleviate the expense out of next year's budget by the same and then we were able to reduce that area overall by $581,000. And those technology purchases are actually on the agenda this evening to move forward with. And it's in the area of Chromebooks and interactive flat panels. These are things that we had included in next year's budget, and we were able to move them into this year's budget, utilizing some of the savings on substitutes and things that we've realized with the the virtual learning. These are things that also it would be in our best interest to order at this time and not wait to order, because there are lead times on these technology items that are getting longer, as this pandemic continues, and particularly in the area of Chromebooks. And you've heard a lot about our virtual learning efforts, and there have been Chromebooks deployed to every student in the district to take home and to do work on. So we need to anticipate that those Chromebooks are in some cases, in a lot of cases, actually getting more use than they normally would. They're going out to homes. They may not come back in the condition that they were issued in, and we will need to be focused on refreshing and replacing those Chromebooks. So we move those purchases into the current years. The interactive flat panels would be the same. We were looking to get those ordered as soon as possible, and they're things that we could start actually working on installing, when they come in, if we can get them ordered sooner. So, and again, with the lead times, we wanted to avoid having delays for the anticipated start of school in September. The debt service budget remains the same. We will be paying off total principal and interest of $7,056,000 for next year. And that is funded by the tax levy, and also we receive some debt service aid from the state. And these numbers remain the same as the tentative budget. Taking an average assessed value home for 2019, we take the numbers as of October 2019. Those are the most recent, of $448,197. That makes the increase in the operating tax impact on an average assessed home $102.84 or $8.57 per month. The debt service impact actually went down slightly. It's a reduction annually of $1.46 on an average assessed home, or 12 cents a month, bringing the total impact between our operating levy and our general fund levy and our tax service levy of $101.38, with the tax rate going from 1.317 to 1.321. Again, these numbers are unchanged from the tentative budget. The only thing that changed in this budget is the allocation and the appropriations, but it did not impact the tax levy or any other items in the budget. Our budget timeline, our tentative budget was approved by the executive county superintendent after we submitted that for review after the board approved it on March 19th. We received the approval on April 6th. The budget was then published in the Asbury Park Press. It appeared on April 18th, 2020. The public hearing on our final budget must be held between April 24th and May 7th. Hence, we have it on the agenda for this evening.
Amy, I have a question.
Yes.
When we first started the budget process, I asked about looking at potential savings for getting waivers for our high school students that don't take the buses. Did we ever finish that to see if there was savings?
We got some information from the high schools as far as who was getting parking permits. But when we looked at that compared to the bus routes, the students are on, many different routes, and just even the potential of having, a couple of students per route potentially come off of a bus was really not going to change our, our bus routes significantly. In addition, as we've talked about, it would be hard to, it would be hard to hold students to that if their circumstances changed and, they had originally waived transportation, but, now they needed the bus either because they don't have a car available, the weather's bad, they don't want to drive. There was a lot of factors or variables in that. And, now at this point, when we're talking about transportation, there's a lot of other question marks as well that would impact, how we're going to be operating that for next year. So I hope that answered your question. We did take a look at it, but determined that it wouldn't make a significant, it wouldn't really make much of an impact on how we route the buses.
Amy?
Yes.
Have we frozen the freeze as far as the spending by building wise? Yeah.
What we normally do, and we did this year, is send out an email to the administrators and others in the district who are responsible for purchasing. We usually send that out basically the end of January, and we tell them, that we want them to project what their needs would be through June 30th, so that we know what the expenses are that have to be encumbered. And if it's not encumbered by that time, we gave them, I don't remember the date this year, but it's probably sometime in early February. And after that date, if there's things that they had not anticipated and still needed to purchase, we needed a rationale of why it wasn't anticipated and why we need to purchase it, which is how we've operated over the past several years. And at this point, there are not a lot of purchase orders coming through. There's been obviously, the staff hasn't been in the buildings for, I've lost track of the time, 5-6 weeks now. And the purchases that are being made at this point for the current year's budget are things that are either directly related to the virtual learning or, facilities needs that, we're still, some of those needs changed after the end of January, early February. But, there's not a large volume of purchases being made at this point.
So do you think that there's a good chance that we'll have money to put into capital reserve at the end of the year?
We likely will, but again, we don't know. It's hard for us to know, what the budget results will be at the end of the year with things like how much we're paying for our transportation contracts and other services and other costs that we may incur. So, we're hoping, it would be a good thing if that happened because, we've obviously been depleting our capital reserve. We're using $667,000 of it in next year's budget. Also part of next year's budget was using half of our maintenance reserve to fund our maintenance activities. So, that will basically bring that down to $260,000. So for a district our size, that's really, negligible. So the best case scenario would be if we could, at least get somewhat of a benefit of having, this terrible pandemic and having all the students out of school and be able to preserve some of these funds to use for the district for projects that we would be looking at in future years. But we don't have a number on that at this point.
Well, I think that goes to what Leonore was trying to say about freezing spending, really look at what it is that people are ordering and do we really need it?
Well, we always do that. I mean, that is our practice every day.
But with our schools being empty right now,
They shouldn't be ordering anything.
Yeah.
Well, there's the principals really are, just ordering whatever minimum things they need, for to operate. There are some district-wide expenses still, and we again, are looking at everything, and the amount of purchasing has greatly dropped off, which is not unusual for this time of year either, because when we're going into May and June, essentially, unless it's things that like graduation expenses and some other end of year things, there's not, the level of purchasing does drop off, in the spring. The majority of the orders are happening during the summer, during the fall, and we do taper off all the time at the end of the year, and everybody starts focusing on next year.
We always focus the ordering and the spending around the time frame when it could be best utilized by the students, and that's what Amy's saying. So I think we're all saying the same thing. It might just be a little differently.
I mean, the only other thing we do, and like we're doing with these technology purchases, is if we know that there's things that are in next year's, budget, or that we can identify to relieve pressure on that, because as we've, talked about already during this meeting, there may be things that come up during next year. Well, there's going to be things that come up during next year that we probably haven't anticipated in next year's budget. So we're going to have to be able to accommodate those expenses. And as Joan, Mrs. Minui's brought up before, we could even have a reduction in state aid. We don't know. So when we're able to be proactive and start getting things that, we may need next year that would also be useful this year to give ourselves, the flexibility next year that, accommodate these additional expenses or potential reductions in revenue, we always look to do that.
One significant expense this spring was the almost 700 devices that after March 13th, we had to hand out to our students so that they could complete their online learning. So, that's rare, but that's our reality in this virtual learning environment. But as already stated, the vast majority of our spending or is more geared towards the regular educational year.
Okay, if there's nothing else, can we move on to public comment? So this would be public comment on agenda items only.
And that would, Mrs. Rogers, that would include the budget, because, you know, we will take a vote on the budget after the close of public comment.
Okay. Now, how do we see the comments? We have to go to live on YouTube?
No. We have one attendee, Rachel Kanopka, who has raised her hand. So she's made it known she'd like to speak.
Okay.
So I will unmute her mic right now.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, how you doing? I had to hit a button. Is it working?
Yeah, we can hear you. We
Okay,
can't
great,
speak, though.
awesome.
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I know I've said this in PIC, but not everybody is at that meeting. But I think Middletown has done a tremendous job with the virtual learning transition, and it was like trial by fire, you know, piloting something in public. And after speaking to multiple friends who have kids in other districts, I have yet to hear of anybody who's done it better than Middletown. So thank you guys. I know it's been crazy, and I know you've been putting in crazy amounts of hours, but on behalf of me, my friends, my children, thank you very much for all you're doing. One quick thing, I also just wanted to say thank you also for the addition of ASL to the high school curriculum. My girls are only in middle school now, but when I actually yelled to the other room to tell them that, they all cheered. So thank you for doing that. I think that's an amazing ad. And then I had kind of a question regarding the possibility of schools reopening. If you had asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have thought Murphy, there was no chance at all he would ever consider reopening the schools before the end of this school year. But given some of his comments recently, I'm thinking there is a chance he might lift the mandate. And I'm wondering legally, if once he does that, is it then the superintendent's discretion, kind of like a snow day, to decide if the school is going to be open or closed? And if we are closed, because of the new virtual learning kind of acceptance that is now in place, would virtual learning legally count for this year if Middletown opted to stay closed, even if the state allowed us to reopen?
Okay, so first of all, Rachel, that's really good questions. I would say that, you know, we've stated, you know, Governor Murphy said that he would not even update again until May 15 and exactly what that'll look like to the end of the school year. We are working on multiple scenarios in case there is an opportunity for us to come back, which looks like it would more likely be, if not in the end of May, a June timeframe, just based on all the conversations, and I'm listening to his updates. So yes, we're running scenarios where it's possible. I wouldn't make those decisions unilaterally. You know, I would make a recommendation based on the impact from the administrative team. But everything that we've said publicly right now is that we'll be taking our direction from the governor. So, you know, we haven't envisioned a scenario where there'd be individual district interpretation based on anything I'm getting from the State Department of Education. We're more either thinking along the lines that we will return as a state based on the, you know, as the governor stated, schools won't be reopened without his, you know, his sanction or his input. So where I see this more as something where the state comes back online, if that were to happen, and it would be based on the direction of the governor. But we are running scenarios with those possibilities.
We have another guest who has raised their hand. It's Vera Piasecki. Going to unmute them now.
Can you hear me now? Is that working? Okay, great.
I hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
I'm sorry, is this an opportunity to talk about the working meeting portion? I don't. Can I talk about the working portion meeting?
Are you talking about the voting items?
No, there was no opportunity to talk about the working meeting. Can I bring up some of those topics?
Vera, do
Well,
you mean
they-
the things we're voting on tonight? Do you mean the things that we're voting on tonight, the voting meeting?
There were some working meeting discussions that there was no opening for public to discuss. Can I ask questions about that?
I believe she's asking about the workshop.
The
Yes.
workshop, yes. the
Workshop.
Would that be
If
the
it- if-
public comment at the end of the meeting? I mean, we have
If I'm not mistaken, this
agenda
is
items, right? Yeah, right.
Amy, we're doing the public hearing on the budget for this section right now, correct?
Well, we were incorporating that with the public comment on all agenda items. So,
When do we get to talk about the workshop meeting?
Man, we're trying to sort through that now, man.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I
mean,
question,
because the workshop was on the agenda for tonight's meeting, I would imagine that Vera's comments or Mrs. Piaseki's comments are
That's all right.
Piaseki's comments are should be welcome now.
Yeah, that's why I was going to defer to Mr. Rogers. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, anything on the agenda, Vera, go ahead.
Great, thank you. I wanted to start off by having a child with special needs. I'd like to thank Dr. Tiedemann and team personally. The first few weeks were very difficult when you have a child that requires a lot of support. You as a parent suddenly become the PT, OT, speech therapist, para, teacher, and I was just praying to get through this and have my child still love me at the end of this. By the fourth week, she was getting virtual OT, virtual speech, from social, fostering friendships has started. She's getting some counseling. So I'd really like to thank them and for their efforts, because it has made a difference. And this week she's been working with her para, which is beautiful. She actually told me to get lost today, and I was very happy to hear that. I would like to encourage, I know there are other parents that are struggling with the social emotional. Our kids don't necessarily text or FaceTime friends. So that face-to-face at school is about, a majority of their social well-being. So anything you can do to help other schools be as proactive as mine has been would be very helpful. So thank you. Just real quickly on strategic planning, and I know it's probably confusing for some of us that were on the committee 5 years ago, but I think Dr. George's recommendation on having a summary or update in May would be very helpful, because it was very confusing for those of us listening. It was done very different 5 years ago. I'm not saying one way is better than the other, because I don't know how this way is going to work through. But it would be useful to have an update on the committee structures and how it's going to work. And then my last question was whether there was any discussion from the state about changing the 180-day requirement, particularly now that they've canceled testing, whether there's been any discussion on the 180-day requirement.
We discussed that today at superintendent. We do like every Wednesday standing meeting with all superintendents, with the executive county superintendent, Dr. Richins, and that question came up by one of the superintendents, and the answer was no. We're online for 180 days, whether it's virtual or we come back to school. And there's been no direction to leave 180 days at this point.
I'm seeing no more raised hands from our attendees.
Chris, do we have anything in the live feed?
There have been no questions posted in.
There's one, Chris.
Yes.
We have a question in the YouTube.
Yes. For students entering middle school next year, what is the game plan to enable grade level to have some form of orientation? This was asked by Lisa Ashley.
I can answer that. They're working on plans for virtual orientation. I wouldn't call it an orientation, but just to get the students a little accustomed to it this year. And then when we get back to school, if we get back to school this year, there can be some type of, how they go over and do the visits. If not next year, we're going to work on some type of special orientation for the incoming students.
Looks like we have a couple more hands that are raised that have popped up here as well. This is Rachel. Rachel Konopka is back. I'll unmute her now.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Yes,
Yes.
okay. It's saying my connection is unstable, so just make weird faces if you can't hear me, I guess. I actually had somebody text me who was unable to raise their hand, so I wanted to ask their question. Based on the kind of the likelihood that we'll follow whatever the governor directs in terms of the schools reopening, if they do reopen this school year and parents are not comfortable sending their kids into school, I know I'm thinking of my own daughter's 5th grade class. She has 26 kids. I can't see any way possible that you could keep those kids 6 feet apart from the. What happens if a parent is uncomfortable sending their child to school?
Dr. George or Pam, may I answer that?
Yes, Les, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. So I don't want to repeat everything that Dr. George said earlier, which was very well stated. But the reality is that the Middletown Township School District has to comply with state law, Title 18A, as well as directives from the Commissioner of Education. And so any decision, and also the board is bound by compulsory education in New Jersey. So in the normal circumstances, if school is open, there is an obligation for parents of kids K through 12, unless the student's over, I believe, 16 or 18, to send their child to school. The local Board of Education doesn't necessarily have the right to waive attendance, absent certain special circumstances, whether it be IDEA or others. So it really is a bit too early to tell. These are all very good questions, but the board and or the administration really can do nothing but speculate right now as to what, if any, options may be available for those types of circumstances. Thank you.
Dr. George, I want to ask a question, I guess, to follow on, because I think Rachel's question, which was, I guess, somebody else's question, but is probably every parent's question. So I would expect that in your conversations with the county commissioner and with the state commissioner, that exact scenario, how do we keep our children 6 feet apart? How do they change classes, et cetera, that's part of the discussions. I mean, I know that, can you just confirm for us that is part of the ongoing discussion, and that somebody is in Governor Murphy's ear, just reminding him of those facts?
Yes.
Okay.
Superintendents are communicating directly with the executive county superintendent on issues. That was a really good scenario that was brought up with 26 students in a class. How do you keep people 6 feet apart? So all of those kind of questions are things that we're talking about and trying to come to a consensus. I think Mrs. Walker wanted to add something as well. I thought I heard her say,
yes, yeah. The state has created a committee of nurses and other health professionals, along with legislators, to come up with protocols that all schools must follow when school reopens. And that committee is going to be a guide for us to determine what we have to do when we get there, in terms of keeping students 6 feet apart, just who wears masks, that type of thing. That will all be laid out for us. Now we can go beyond that, but that would be the minimum. And they're just starting those discussions right now.
And we have representation. You might want to share that, as you know very well.
Yes, our head nurse Eileen Gavin has been asked to be on that committee. So they haven't met even yet for the first time, but she will keep us apprised of what the committee is coming up with so we can be prepared.
We'll have an ear to the knowledge very quickly, though.
Yeah.
It's important. I'm glad that Rachel brought this up though, because I hear from a lot of friends, it is a concern for parents. Some parents aren't comfortable sending their kids to school with masks or having to be 6 feet apart. And, you know, I hope that there's an option for parents who are not comfortable with that. And I'm sure they'll come up with something. I'm hopeful.
And I guess, you know, and compound that, you know, the flip side of that coin, right, is that as the state reopens, you know, and people go back to work, it becomes a childcare issue. And so I'm sure that, you know, every argument has a push and a pull, and the push is the safety of our children, but the pull is the fact that it's going to create a childcare issue for parents who have to go back to work and who don't have the luxury, you know, that a lot of us have of being able to work from their homes. So, you know, I think, you know, I appreciate that this puts, you know, Dr. George and all the superintendents in the state in a precarious position. I just, you know, I trust that, you know, Dr. George, you and your colleagues are advocating for the parents on both sides of that push and pull, and that, you know, that we're bringing Middletown leadership to the decisions.
I also like to point out that Margie Christone had pointed, we're talking about when our next Parent Information Committee meeting is going to be. And I had talked to Pam, and since we have 2 meetings in May, we'll have 2 opportunities to communicate with the public as we get direction from the state and the DOE in May. So we're gonna stay with the originally scheduled date, or the scheduled date of June 2nd for that Parent Information Committee meeting too, because we'll have the 2 meetings in May, then that June 2nd, and then the June meeting. So that we, you know, continue to have the opportunity for parents to interact with us as well.
We have another guest who's raised their hand. First name is Renee. We do not have a last name, so maybe they can announce themselves. I'm unmuting them now.
This is Renee Nadal. I'm a parent of a Port Monmouth Elementary School student, and there's concern about how the transition to New Monmouth is going to be taking place under the current conditions. Obviously, when I was last in your presence and you voted to close our school, we didn't foresee this happening. But, you know, my son, who was crying the next day, oh, I can't go back to my school, obviously then a couple days later couldn't go back to his school, which has made this conversation so much harder. And I know there are some minor things in the works with the classes individually meeting from the 2 different schools, but I was wondering on a broader level what's being planned, because obviously the closing of our school is not going to be canceled. You know, but there's a big lack of closure for our staff, for our students, and I wanted to know if there had been any discussions about it.
Yes, thank you, Renee. That's a really good question. Mrs. Walker, do you want to talk about the discussions that we've had with Mrs. McCormick and Mr. Ferry?
Yes, Mrs. McCormick and Mr. Ferry have been working on virtual activities for the students to get them to meet and socialize with the students and the staff at New Monmouth, and vice versa. As far as, I think you're talking about closure of leaving that building. And again, it's going to be following the direction of the governor when we can again gather. And if we are able to do that prior to, you know, September, we, you know, that's something that they're talking about, you know, an activity or some kind of, you know, closure for the students. Otherwise, it's going to have to be virtual, just like everything else we're doing right now, which we tried to keep things as normal as possible, but virtual is just a lot different.
Okay, looks like we have also a follow-up on YouTube from Lisa Ashley. I'll read the comment now. I know you mentioned addressing gaps that are undoubtedly occurring upon our return, but will the timeline of the benchmarks and assessed standards be adapted, considering most will be behind?
I'll just further add to the conversation we've had. We have communicated that concern. That's a really good question. Our curriculum team has communicated that same point and concern to our county superintendent office, the arm of curriculum instruction at the county office, as well as to the state. And it is our expectation that locally within our curriculum frameworks and our units of study, that we're probably going to have to make some adjustments to the way that our curriculum is rolled out to allow for time in September or whenever we return for us to be able to determine if there is need for time to revisit standards that would have been developed or students would have been exposed to in previous grade levels. Yes, that is something that we are actively considering.
I'm not seeing any more hands raised by attendees or any new comments in the YouTube feed. We did have one comment come in to the board meeting at middletownk12.org inbox. I can read that now if you would like. Yeah. Okay. This is from Erica Lucchese. She has 2 students at Nut Swamp Elementary. She says, I wanted to take time to comment on what a smooth transition it has been converting to virtual learning with all things considered. I want to commend the administration, teachers, and staff for being organized, present, and positive throughout this process. It was impressive how quickly measures were taken to give our children some sense of normalcy and to have interaction with the teachers and staff at their school community. For example, consistent morning messages and even classroom Google Meet check-ins with our principal present for the kids to see. Google Meets and virtual videos done with the teachers and paraprofessionals have made such a difference for my children to be able to see the faces of staff and friends. My kids both borrowed Chromebooks from the school, and the system was smooth, safe, and easy to obtain them. The virtual MTPS digital library has been extremely helpful for my kids to have access to books and resources for projects. I also want to commend student services for taking efforts to continue services to the extent possible. Co-teachers are doing virtual small group teachings, virtual speech therapy is going well, and paraprofessionals have been present in the Google Hangouts. It has been nice to see this rollout not only include the bare basics. I know for our family, the connection and face-to-face contact with their teachers, principals, staff, and friends has made a huge difference. Thank you, Erica Lucchese.
And Erica did want to thank the administration as well in a follow-up email that we had. And I told her that I would speak up for her, that she did want to thank the administration. And I'm so glad that she mentioned the paras and the co-teachers. They are instrumental in this process. And I am so glad that she mentioned their wealth and their worth. It really does help.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Erica.
We had one last question come in on the YouTube page from Lorraine Casey. What will happen to the children's personal items left in school? This would be for the children going into a different school next year.
Hi. That's something we're starting to discuss, trying to figure out how we're going to get personal items back to students, or whether it's elementary, middle, or high. We're going to do it. We're just not sure how it's going to be. We're going to wait for the governor's, his address in the next few weeks, see if things are loosened up a little bit, that we can somehow have students, or parents come and pick them up somehow if we get them ready, and we can just hand them over. And we're still looking at other options too. So we'll get them to you. We're just working on that.
I'm not seeing anything else.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, we move to the agenda.
Yes.
Madam President.
Yes, sorry. Seeing no further questions, I'd like to move on to the adoption. I need a motion to adopt the 2020 to 2021 budget.
So moved. I'll second that then.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
I'm opposed.
Abstentions? Okay. Moving on to our next item. Number 9, I need a motion to approve the proclamations. That's the National Teacher Appreciation Day, School Nurse Day, Administrative Professionals Day, and National School Principals Day. So that is 9A through D, please.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? I need a motion to approve the minutes from the special voting meeting on 3/11/2020, the executive session on 3/18/2020, and the regular voting meeting on 3/18/2020.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? For the report of the president tonight, I think I said all my thank yous. Thank you so much to Dr. George and the administration, the staff, the teachers for going above and beyond. It's really helping with the social and emotional well-being of the students during this difficult time. The virtual learning transition was seamless, and it's a real comfort for my kids as well as other kids in the district. Thank you to the parents for supporting the students. And again, I said that 95% of the students signed on to virtual learning with Imagine Learning, and that's a feather in the cap of every parent who's working so hard, so thank you. If you do have trouble, please reach out to your teacher, to your principal, to your child study team, because they really do want to help. And if there are any resources that you need during the pandemic, there are a few places that I just wanted to mention tonight. The SOS Matters face mask sewing group. If you go onto Facebook and Google SOS Matters Facebook face mask sewing group, they're making masks not only for hospitals but for individuals. There is a program called Headspace. It's free meditation for parents and kids. We mentioned yoga earlier that helps. There's also NJTV Live for programming for grades 3 through 5. So after you do your virtual learning with Middletown K-12, maybe you'll hop on NJTV. There's also a place called Immediate Care. They're doing testing and they have appointments. So if you can't get an appointment at PNC or Bergen, you can get tested for COVID as well as the antibody test. So that's the antibody test. You have to have no symptoms for 10 days, but you can get tested. And then for COVID, you need to have symptoms to get tested. And that's it for me. Moving on to the report of the business administrator. I need a motion to approve C1 through 4.
So moved.
I
Seconded.
need a second, please.
Sorry,
Discussion.
seconded.
That's okay. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. I need a motion to approve C1. So that's the HIB report, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. The approval of an internship contract between the Middletown Township Public Schools and Georgian Court University. The recommendation of approval for Dr. Lily Steiner, Monmouth University faculty member, to conduct a research study at Navasink Elementary School on literacy. The superintendent of school recommends the approval for Donna Feria, Georgian Court University graduate student, to conduct a research study on teachers' perceptions and knowledge of social emotional learning. Just wanted to make sure the public knows what we're voting on tonight. So I need a motion for that to be. Yeah.
So moved.
And
Oh.
you left out number 2.
B1. I'm sorry, C1. Number 2 is the, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. The incidents of violence, vandalism, weapons, and substance abuse. So that would be C1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, please.
So moved.
Seconded.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm opposed on number 1, bullying.
Thank you. And abstentions. We have a couple items in the addendum.
There's
So
a technology,
for
right, is on
technology,
the. Mhm.
we have A1, approval of the purchase of Boxlight Pro Color interactive flat panel displays cover. And number 2, approval of the purchase of ASUS C203 Chromebooks. So that's, I need a motion for A1 and 2, please.
So moved.
Seconded.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions. I need a motion to approve B1, that's the recommendation of the approval of home instruction. Number 2, approval of a settlement agreement. So that's, sorry, that's B1 and 2, please.
So moved.
I need
Seconded.
a second, please. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. In facilities, Amy, do I have anything for facilities? I don't see anything.
No,
Nothing for facilities. Okay, that's what I thought.
no, no facilities, no policy.
Okay, so we're on to curriculum. I need a motion to approve E1, the approval of the field trip destinations. 2, the approval for district curricula for the 2020 to 2021 school year. Number 3, renewal of New Zealand Pro District license for the 2020 to 2021 school year. Number 4, renewal of Linkit subscription for K through 12. And renewal number 5 for Brain Pop and Brain Pop Junior. So I need a motion for E1 through 5, please.
So moved.
So moved.
Second, please. Discussion? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions. For finance, I need a motion to approve number 1, the approval of medical, prescription, and dental insurance contracts for the period of July 1st through June 30th. So July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. And then number 2, the approval of resolution for participation in coordinated transportation with the Educational Services Commission of New Jersey for the transportation of special education, non-public, public, and/or vocational school students for the period of July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. For G, I need a motion to approve G1, which is approval of the suspension report.
So moved.
Seconded.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. For personnel, I need a motion to approve I1 through, let's see, we got through number 11 plus we have 1, 2, and 3 on the addendum.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. Moving on to old business, please.
I have, I just want to bring up one thing. I know we spent a fair amount of time on the meeting tonight talking about the district's response to distance learning and our leadership in this area. I just wanted to speak into the record an experience that I've had over and over in my role in my job. I speak to people in multiple states and multiple
Sorry,
countries.
Nick. Mrs. Kamenidi, can you mute your microphone?
Shut up.
Thank you.
So, so I speak with a lot of people in a lot of different states and a lot of different countries. And the interesting thing about this pandemic is that for the first time in my life, you know, basically everybody everywhere is going through the same thing, and everybody who has children is experiencing the same thing. And so, you know, we begin our, you know, Microsoft Teams, you know, meetings with a little bit of small talk about how our kids are doing and how we've all turned into teachers and whatnot. And it is the rule that every person that I speak to, whether they are in another state or elsewhere in New Jersey or in a different country, their experience with distance learning just pales in comparison to what we've done here. I brought this up to Dr. George. I sent him an email, but I feel it's worth, again, reading into the public record that, in speaking with my colleagues in the city of Toronto, a progressive, wonderful city in Canada, they had to take 2 weeks off and burn 2 weeks of snow days just to teach their teachers how to do distance learning, whereas our administration and our building level administrators and our teachers and paras and everybody slid right into this process. And so, I can't overstate how proud I am of our district, how proud I am of our community, our parents, and our kids, for rolling with an unprecedented societal event and not just making the best of it, but in so many cases thriving. It's amazing to see. I'm really proud of us. I think Dr. George, you and your team have done an incredible job, and, just thank you. Just the best I can say is just thank you.
Yeah, I echo that 100%. Amazing job.
Thank you very much for your recognition. I have to say it's a team effort, and I think that our work, I didn't give a superintendent's report, but I will say that please keep looking at our newsletter, because teacher leaders, building level administrators, nurses, we're all putting into that because we all take our work very seriously. And I think our work with Future Ready really prepared us in this moment for virtual learning. I really do. And I'm very grateful to our teacher leaders and our administrators and everybody who worked to bring that work to fruition. We were recognized amongst the very best of New Jersey, one of only 4 school districts to receive silver with distinction honors as it related to our work with Future Ready. We had more schools certified Future Ready schools than any school district in New Jersey. And I think in this moment, all that work, all that preparation really came to fruition. So thank you to everybody that supported those efforts along the way. And I really include the board in that, because the board's support for personalized learning and our work with Future Ready really strongly prepared us for this moment. Thank you.
I'd like to mention, we talked a lot before about virtual learning and how great the teachers are doing with it and what people can do. Somebody was asking for recommendations on how to make it even better. Well, we're forgetting to mention our arts department, because in between, I know a lot of parents that are using music and art as a break in between the educational lessons. And I think that our arts teachers and our music teachers, and they're just doing a great job with keeping in touch with our kids and keeping them active and coming up with activities for them to take part in. I also wanted to mention an appreciation to all the staff members who have been driving around town doing parades so that the kids could see their faces in person. I think that helps with social, emotional, all the way through. And I know you talk about lead teachers, but I have to say, I think all of our teachers became lead teachers during this pandemic, because even the people we thought that, weren't up on technology and couldn't handle this, they handled this and they're handling it well. So I would like to recognize all staff members as lead teachers and thank them for all they're doing for our schools, our kids, and our community. And I also think that we should be putting on a future agenda for Parent Appreciation Day, like we have Teacher Appreciation, Nurse Appreciation, because the parents in this community have really stepped up to the plate. And it goes to show what a community could do when things go wrong. And I've always said that we see the best of Middletown when people have to pull together to support our students.
Okay, if there's not any other old business, we'll move on to new business, please.
I have a question. And addressing, what a lot of people are talking out there. Could we talk a little bit about, if we don't go back, what are our plans for graduation? what are some of the ideas that are coming up for prom and all the end of the year activities for our seniors. I know we discussed graduation a little bit at PIC, but a lot of people don't attend that or didn't watch those videos. Maybe we could address it a little bit.
Yes, we are actually planning a lot of different ways right now. We're developing multiple plans based on whether we have to do it virtual, whether we can do it in person, whether there's some kind of hybrid. And it all kind of depends on what the governor is going to tell us in a couple of weeks. I think that's where we're going to get most of our information. So we can't finalize any plans. We have lots of ideas for the graduation. And once we get more direction from the governor, then we'll be able to solidify them and, you know, bring them out to the public. As far as I'm sorry,
Can
go
we
ahead.
share some? Can we share some of those ideas, even though we know that they're not guaranteed? Like some of the things that we're thinking about.
I really don't want to do that at this time because you know I don't want someone to, because they're not really vetted out fully, and we're still getting more and more ideas every day. We're getting them from other districts. We're getting them from our students. Administrators are coming up with these ideas. I think we have to wait another few weeks before we really can have a good discussion about that. Proms, we have flexible dates right now for proms. The venues have been very flexible. So if there's a possibility to have them, then we will go on and have them. We're working with the students on what they want their proms to look like if we can't. So that's something that they are kind of framing for us, the proms. So again, we're waiting for the direction from the governor before we move forward with any of them, any of those plans.
Mrs. Walker, I support that it's too early. It's premature to have those discussions. That's why we really wanted to keep that PIC timeframe to June 2nd. We had good discussions with our students too and got feedback from them about what they saw about that. And we know that building level administrators have had follow-up discussions. So, we want to fully vet all those potential scenarios and options before we come out. And, Ms. Konopka said something earlier that, 2 weeks ago, I didn't even think it would be possible, but things look different now as we talk about, parks reopening and those kind of things, that there is a possibility. However, remote that may be, there is a possibility right now. So I think we have to continue to vet potential solutions and as it relates to the options that we could have, whether they be virtual or whether they be, actual in-person options.
The other question I had is today I saw in the paper that the fields are opening. Is that our school fields too?
That's recreation. That was from recreation. That was not a direct discussion with us. That's not for our teams. And we had conversations with Ms. Walker and I today with Mr. Carroll to give direction. It's not for us to, have any captain-led practices or anything like that. Those are small groups. I think it was pretty well defined as it related to that. It was not school related. It was recreational. I think it came out from the township, right, Mrs. Walker?
Yes, it came out.
I understand that, but my question is, are we opening up our fields?
I think at this time, the governor has not opened up schools, so we cannot open up our fields.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know because, in the beginning, fields were all, lumped together. So I wasn't sure if we were opening up our fields.
Yeah.
Okay, if that's it for new business, I'd like to move on to public comment. This could be on any topic, doesn't have to be on the agenda. Limit to 30 minutes, 3 minutes each, please. Chris?
I'm seeing no hands raised
Nothing?
and no new questions.
Okay, seeing no one wanting to speak, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting, please.
So moved.
I need a second, please.
Seconded.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
All right. Good night,
Have
everybody.
a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Chris, thank you for
all
supporting
our
the meeting.
staff members. Thanks,
Good night.
board.
Thanks,
to all.
Chris.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Chris.
everybody. Have a great night.
Bye all.